go. Ain't that free?
I'll use my number for that.
I don't like chocolate.
Okay.
You got what is this? Fruit snack?
Yeah.
You got me.
I finally decided to implement this into my daily structure. It used to be an iPad only, and then like I was like, okay, the city gave me this. Let me. It's basically a big phone for me to check my email on it. Yeah, but the owner of this implanted a 5G microchip in me when I got the vaccine.
Yeah, well, that happened.
You should get better signal on it now.
Yeah, you got RSVP my party, man.
Ray, did you do that already?
You didn't RSVP?
I'm there. What day is it?
I got to pay Eric still. Not Eric in particular, but they don't charge you. I'm like, no, you have to charge me.
Yes.
I'm special, I have to pay.
Yeah.
It's almost a party, right?
Huh? Yeah, oh, she will be too, buddy. Yeah, I didn't never used it right before. So it was, like, she was like saving it. I didn't know she was saving it, so I went in and thought she had sent everything. So I went in and added like 3 or 4 people, and then hit send, and that sent out everything without realizing. And we're still adding people up, right? We're like, because we didn't realize who all we sent it to.
We'll be there.
Yeah, how was Brady's night?
Yeah.
I hate missing that. Sarah was.
Yeah, I was talking to Yardy about that.
Got the point in there.
Get Pat lounging over there. I like the office.
Oh, good.
Thanks for the tour.
Yeah.
I was back over there again, so
These guys like it. I'm old school one. Paper chase kind of guy, you know, you enjoy that.
you want the wood in the books.
You remember the library had the old place?
Oh, you remember? That's where we played craps.
Right. That's all you remember.
That's all I remember. When did she send this? Did Shayla send out these news? Wait, I probably have it in there.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order. We'll go ahead and get started. As you all probably know, we have a very robust agenda, so I want to try to set some ground rules so that we can move through the meeting expeditiously. We're going to begin with citizen input. We will minimize that time to 3 minutes per speaker. And board updates, we want to keep those around 5 to 8 minutes, leaving time for questions for mayor and council. And as we go through the items for discussion, let's try to keep those within a 10, 15-minute period, and only limit discussions to the question. If we kind of veer off to the right or to the left, I'll nudge us back. But let's try to go through this meeting expeditiously and only focus on the question and the agenda items. So we'll begin with roll call. Let the roll show that all are present and accounted for. And then we'll move down to item B, which is citizen input. And again, if you have any citizens that would like to speak, please come to the podium, give your name and your address.
Good evening, my name is Kathleen Allen and I live at 297 Longview Drive, and I'm here to follow up on my previous comments about the basketball courts at Rossi Brundage, wherein I urged you to talk and, more importantly, listen to those who play basketball there. The reality right now is that you can't go listen to basketball players because city staff have removed the rims, so nobody can play ball there. If the city is in what one council member described to me as a fact-finding and preliminary design phase, I would ask that your fact-finding be both qualitative and quantitative. Unfortunately, from a qualitative perspective, you have silenced key stakeholders by taking away from them the public good, so their presence is for all intents and purposes eliminated, and their opinions far less likely to be part of the equation. You cannot disperse a crowd and then try to conduct interviews in it. Likewise, considering the situation quantitatively, what the city has actually done is manipulated mayor and council's data sources by effectively eliminating one of them. If you truly want to gather facts before making a decision, then don't take some off the table by putting them in the trash. As the city proudly posted on Facebook about Mr. Rossi Brundage in honor of Black History Month, I urge you not to silence the voices of African Americans and many others in our diverse community who enjoy the basketball court in our park. Please put the rims back up. Let our Norcross players rediscover what they've been missing this winter, and then listen to their voices before making any final or very long-term decisions about Rossi Brundage Park. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Certainly appreciate you being here. Any other discussion from any citizens at this particular time? Having heard none, we'll move to board updates. Trixie Fowler, Parks and Green Space, and Trails update.
Since I've been instructed to significantly reduce my presentation, bear with me. I'm going to go really, really fast. First, I want to thank Mayor and Council for reintroducing and supporting the Parks, Green, and Trails Commission, adding the Trails component to this. This is super exciting, and hopefully a year from now you'll be very familiar with all we're doing and in a good way. When discussion began about a year ago to reform the commission and add Trails the name, I imagined it being more than a think tank, rather a think and do tank with the city, and already that's what we are. Each month since August, we have what I call a round table meeting with everyone present invited to voice their ideas and opinions. In addition to the 5 residents you appointed to our board, we are regularly joined by the Tree Preservation Board, Sustainable Norcross. Michael Jones is our intrepid liaison with park staff, and we're all very grateful for Council Member Bruce Gaynor, who regularly shares ideas, insights, and reminds me to make motions. So what are we thinking and doing? We began last August by identifying opportunities. In my experience with trying to tackle an elephant this big, it works better to identify specific kinds of opportunities and let those drive research, rather than just to build a plan built on broad concepts. But we're going to do that, but in the meantime, here are some of the opportunities we identified. We envision connecting nature, cultural, heritage resources in a more contiguous and accessible manner. We are considering updates and supplements to the master plan, updating current ArcGIS story maps and GIS maps, and identifying community stakeholders who are going to jump in and help us. We're not just the 5 of us who do this alone. We want to reimagine existing parks and imagine new ones to provide equitable access to a broader diversity of people in our community. We imagine nature-based education, recreation, and health initiatives, such as ways for the city to promote more non-competitive, non-sports outdoor recreation like walking, biking, or simply picnicking under the shade of a tree. And we see opportunities to develop our outdoor infrastructure needs, such as forest trails, bicycle routes, and yes, pickleball and basketball courts, where they'll be safely used and more broadly enjoyed. We plan to engage the community by more thoroughly identifying and better connecting its cultural, economic, and ecological assets, and by inviting people of diverse abilities, interests, and backgrounds to the visioning and conceptual design process. We are also envisioning reaching into areas of our community that are currently underserved and finding ways to create unique outdoor recreational opportunities that round out our city's portfolio of outdoor spaces. And we recognize the tremendous regional opportunities to connect. We saw Norcross to the Atlanta Regional Commission's Riverlands Project, Lynette's Master Trail Plan, and to expand our geography in the Norcross-Wilburn Trail. All of this can be done with a pretty straightforward agenda if we do things one at a time. With that in mind, we have invited speakers regularly to speak at each of our meetings, learning from them and gaining insights from city staff and other volunteer board members. We recently teamed up with Tracy Rye to apply for an opportunity through the Trust for Public Land that, if awarded, will provide the city with expert guidance on the next steps in design planning, green infrastructure relevant to the Beaufort Highway Improvement Plan. Mary Beth has forwarded 2 more grant opportunities that I'll be working on this week, one with Georgia Recreation and Park Association for summer youth programming, and one called the 22 AARP Community Challenge Grant that I haven't even looked at yet, but I will. My goal for 2023 is to write a grant for the city that applies for a minimum of $500,000 in funding to the Georgia Outside Stewardship Program. Currently, Commission member Joe Weber is actively researching opportunities to partner with Georgia Power and leverage the open space under the power easement as a possible trail system, a pollinator meadow, or even a dog park. Cassie Deal has been working with Melissa Ziegler, Parks Department and Utilities, and with Mary Beth, to move plans for the historic cemetery forward, including assisting Melissa with the application for a historic registry that council confirms we want to move in that direction. Krista DeKruiger is leading the charge to explore the best way to address the baseball, pickleball issues in Rossi Brundage Park. And at our last meeting, we discussed engaging Norcross's young people, specifically those living and playing in the neighborhood, as an advisory committee to help us imagine the opportunities there. And we look forward to bringing council some ideas very soon, as we were directed at the last meeting. Tony Catchett, who has been a Norcross resident less than a year, has already lent his expertise as a landscape designer and community planner to draw up the concept plan for Bee City's new pollinator demo garden in front of City Hall. And like all of us, he's looking forward to partnering with the Tree Board to support Roof Design Studio and city staff in designing the entrance of Johnson Dean Forest Preserve. And last week, I submitted a list of projects to Mr. Johnson and Mary Beth that we hope council will consider when allocating funds for the 2023 SPLOST budget. This list was voted on and approved by the board meeting on February 17th, and totaled over $1.7 million worth of projects and land purchases. We think big, aim high. At that same meeting, we finalized and approved our vision and mission statement, which reads as follows. Our vision is to envision a city that inspires regional standards for sustainable design and progressive practices that empower natural and human communities to interact and thrive. Our mission is to proactively introduce new ways of thinking about community design and development that embrace green infrastructure as a priority in city planning, amplifies the community's ecological, cultural, and economic assets, and enhances Norcross's parks, green space, and trail system by increasing access, equity, biodiversity, and connectivity. And we imagine accomplishing this by supporting staff actively, respecting their workloads, and doing what we can to make Norcross a healthier and more green community. Is that short enough?
That's short enough. We certainly appreciate you being here, and certainly appreciate the work of Parks and Green Space Committee. So council, this time we'll open the floor for questions.
Can you read that paragraph again? It was about non-competitive sports?
Yes.
Or if you know the gist of it.
The gist of it is just there's obviously more than one way to enjoy a park. And I think one of the things that we're getting at in vision is not by necessarily bringing in more soccer fields or more competition levels, although that could be very well appropriate.
Yeah.
But also realizing that there's areas that would be passive activity, like there's some green space over Mitchell Road that, I think there used to be an old gun, during World War II, there was a gun armory, something, I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, but that's unused space, but instead of turning it into a soccer field to this wetlands area, we could make it a more passive green space use.
Okay.
So it's not making it all about turning it into a park as a heavy use. We're very good at that actually, but I think we've got room to expand.
I would put I love all the big ideas. I would just encourage us to follow the current park master plan and update as needed.
An update is needed, and that was what the discussion would be in that.
I think we'd still find out that the soccer field is probably the number one.
Yeah, I didn't mean that we were ruling that out.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I
we don't
think-
have any place to put it.
But I think, yeah, that's one of the challenges. But, yeah, it's reimagining different
Okay.
ways. Not just getting our mind stuck in this is one thing that we need to do, which we're not known for anyway, so.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Absolutely.
One question, do you know anything new about the grant for the recycle?
Nothing yet, other than Foster Public Way has sent it to their partners for review.
Is it true that we're the only applicant?
It was sounding that way before we turned everything in, so it's a sort of, if you apply, you most likely gonna get it.
Okay.
Yeah, but we had to work really hard on it still.
You did a great job.
I'm excited about it.
That's great.
Great, thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, next up, we will have Bill May, V-Waste, Recycle Atlanta. Bill, thank you so much for being here.
What does our agenda say, where?
Where? Because I'm looking at.
I mean, it kind of looks like where.
It does look like it.
Actually,
Sorry.
Ware is actually chair of the Southwest Gwinnett Chamber, and that's where we met and we talked
okay.
about e-waste. And I wanted to have you just simply talk a little bit about what your company and specifically to answer any questions to the council concerning e-waste. I know that something that you do is, and that you're proposing is to offer to all of our residents in Norcross the opportunity to recycle for free.
That's exactly.
So we'll let you go into that. I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, you're doing a great job. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here tonight. We do have a free drop-off location here in Peachtree Quarters, Norcross area for residents who want to come by and recycle their old electronics safely and sustainably. There's no charge for that. And we have a list of the items that we can take free. And then for businesses, medical facilities, schools, municipalities, we offer a free on-site pickup. We'll come to your location, pick up the electronics that you want to recycle. There's no minimum, there's no maximum required for this. If you have any hard drives, we'll wipe or shred them based on your preference. And that service is provided free of charge as well. So it's a very budget-friendly availability for businesses and residents.
Thank you so much, Bill. I certainly like that word, free.
I was about to say, why do we need a presentation?
Keep it moving, right? Well, during our last recycle, I think we paid a previous vendor $500 to, and you're offering that service without that cost for us.
Exactly right. It's a free service, everything that we have listed on the handout I gave you. In addition, a lot of cities like to participate in Earth Week, Earth Day. We can provide a free drop-off location during that time as well. So both businesses and residents can come by and drop off and celebrating Earth Day, Earth Week, and sometimes it turns into Earth Month.
Thank you. We certainly appreciate that. Any other questions, council?
I'll follow up.
Yes.
I'll follow up.
And also, we'll also give your information to our sustainable committee to work with them on, possibly work with them on some other projects.
Great.
So thank you so much for being here, Bill.
What's your last name again, sir?
Bill May,
May?
M-A-Y.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move to Norcross landscaping update. There's our vendor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
give you an update on the new library landscape. So everybody knows the embankment between the library and Beaufort Highway. We have some ongoing responsibility for that maintenance. Well, we have had ongoing responsibilities continued. We've received some feedback which say that that appearance is not up to the city standards, to everything else that we do in the city. So we're looking for some guidance on near term or future on what you want to do with that property. And we do have some preliminary numbers for the landscaping. I'm glad everyone's sitting down. I can share that if you want me to.
Yes.
Okay. That's about 78,000. So that's irrigation. That's irrigation, that's for the plant material, and there's also a beauty strip between Beaufort Highway and the sidewalk, and that will be pending Drought notification and some additional work with drainage issues. So these are very preliminary numbers, but that's what we have so far. We're just looking for guidance if you want to do something on this, or if we want to do this down the road.
Thank you for that information. Council, we'll open it up for questions, discussion.
So, this is in front of the library, between the library and Beaufort Highway, and then beside the library parking deck going up the sidewalk.
Yes, all that area. We have the plaza, and then Brick Road around the, turnaround, so that's ours. All that's fine. I think the area in question is the embankment between Beaufort Highway and the back of the building.
Okay, so that was landscaped when the library was put in. Some of that plant material has died. Was there warranty on that? Did we pay for that landscaping? Was that paid for by Gwinnett County? Was there warranty on that plant material? What's the plan with the plant material that's already there?
Some of that plant material, there's a plan to repurpose that. So some of that can be replanted, and there's already discussions about doing that.
So our agreement with the county is that we're responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of between the building and the sidewalk, basically the berm there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And there wasn't irrigation put in when they built it?
There was a curb inlet, there was, the irrigation's going to be tied into the well at Willingham Park. There was a curb inlet and pipe, and Matthew's here, he can talk a little bit more on that, but somewhere along the way, somebody removed that. So we're assuming that it was the construction of the library, somehow that got removed, so that's a drainage problem. But we do have a well at Willingham Park, and we're going to tie into that.
To get the pipe from the well to the front of the library, there's a lot of hard surface in there.
Well,
How do you do that?
Merle's got the numbers for us, and Merle has she cannot be here tonight, so she's got 9,000 for irrigation.
Councilmember Beckles has a question.
Regarding those blank walls, could we, like NPAC or someone do some type of art on those walls?
I would love that.
We just got some information about a glow-in-the-dark art piece, a mural. In the day it's one thing, and at night it's something else. So that might be a good idea to get add that to your list for us.
Okay.
Is that city maintained, the exterior of the building?
No.
That's county. That's the library.
That's county. The land is ours to maintain.
We can still ask.
Yeah,
Yeah. I agree.
yeah, it's
something.
dark, ugly cement. If we can bring some light to it, why not?
So, do you want to give us guidance on, do you consider this a near term, or do you want to talk about this later date?
I think what your plan is to bring back numbers for us to discuss.
Well, I have the numbers.
78.
Preliminary.
Sorry?
Preliminary numbers.
Yeah. So you want,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
It does sound like it's got a matter of,
Councilmember Gaynor, if you would, go ahead.
For this kind of an investment, it just seems like it'd be nice to have like a rendering of what they were planning on putting in. Because if $9,000 of it is irrigation, that leaves an awful lot of money that's supposedly plant material. And at least from my perspective, I just would be interested in, for that kind of an investment, if we were talking $20 25 grand or something like that, that to me would be more in line with about that space with what you would sort of spend, but for close to $80,000, I'd like at least some kind of, you know, and multiple folks looking at it, giving a proposal for what they're talking about.
You know, the future renderings, what we would come back with for that 80,000 or 78,000. Yes, I do that.
Councilmember Daniel.
It does sound like this is timely, because if we don't do anything, what happens?
Well, it's dormant
Everything
now,
died?
so, it's hard for me to judge because it looks pretty bad. But it is dormant now, so some of that is going to come back. I just don't know to what extent that's going to come back.
Yeah. But there's no irrigation.
No, I think they have irrigation, but we're looking to tie it into the well.
Oh, I misunderstood you.
Yeah, well,
There's irrigation there now, but it's tied to county water system?
Yes, is that true?
So there was temporary irrigation there, then that was removed. But Merrill actually discussed, I don't know the contractor name, but she discussed actually connecting it to the well. Because the area between the building, or between the library and Brunswick is actually tied to the well.
Okay, so-
it's a matter of connecting that portion to the well.
Sorry, just a simple question. Is there irrigation there now?
No, not in that area.
There's no irrigation there now.
There was.
That's-
during
There
the initial
was, but
plan,
it's been
yeah.
disconnected,
Yeah.
so at the very least, something has to be done with irrigation.
Well, I mean, we have
That's a
cities-
pretty important thing.
I'm sorry, we have city staff that waters, you see them watering everywhere. Yeah. So that's added to their list.
Yeah.
Councilmember Hicks.
Well, there is irrigation that comes from upstairs. It's irrigating out right now. But I do have a question along the lines of drought-resistant plants. So the CID has had all of where we landscape, the right-of-way is all drought-resistant, so we never have to water it. I'm sure it's a little bit more upfront, but that might be something we want to look at. When you talk about the cost of labor, getting someone out there, they're going to be doing more and more of this, especially we just heard about adding more and more parks. Is drought-resistant plants something we could look into that might actually, in this location, we wouldn't have to spend $9,000 on irrigation?
I will confirm that, but I'm pretty confident with what Merle's been doing.
It's all drought-resistant?
Well, I want to confirm that.
Okay.
Yeah. I will find out about that, and I will get renderings for her to show you.
And my last comment would be this spend with our contingency that we've already used, is this budgeted?
No.
I would assume that we put this in the budget process, and it might look bad this summer, but we can deal with that as elected officials, that, hey, we want to spend your money frugally. It's been discussed in the budgeting process.
Okay, that's good.
You
We
have
can do
a-
portable art.
Sorry?
We can do portable art.
Portable art?
You have a window in which you need an answer, because you can only plant within a certain window.
I'll find out about what, the plant material?
Yes.
I'll find out from Merle, what's the timeline on that.
Okay.
Like I said, it's kind of hard to know because everything's dormant, but some of that will come back, but I feel like it's not up to the standards of the city.
Okay. So you have clear direction to move forward.
I'm going to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank
Certainly
you.
appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move to Norcross Trolley, Kate Kitchen.
Good evening. Well, as most of you probably know, the trolley has not been in use, and it is because the battery stopped holding a charge, and so it could not possibly make it around the 6 times the 6 times around. So right now, we've had it picked up by Specialty Car Company, and that's a golf cart company that's located. The showroom is in Roswell, but where they're working on it is in Stone Mountain. So they came and got it Thursday, and he was supposed to get back with me today, but they're very short-staffed, so I didn't hear, what exactly is wrong with it. Public Works tested the batteries, 3 of them, and they're all connected, and they just couldn't hold the charge. So I think we just have to replace the 12 6-volt batteries. I think that might be the trick. But I also wanted to bring up that I talked to the manufacturer of the moto electric vehicles, and I told him exactly what we were using it for, how many miles we went per night, and he said, it's not that we're using it too often, it's fine to do that every weekend. He said, but you can't drive it as far as where we've been driving it, because he said what we are doing is we're pulling all the batteries are starting to go because we're pushing the limit. He said for our town with incline, we can get probably a 45 mile range. But when we do that 6 times around and we added in the One Heart Church, we're really close to it. So it would just start to die off. And so my suggestion, if you want to think about it, is to do the original lap that we did, because we picked up people at Fracture Park and we went through the downtown and up to Cultivation, and not go all the way down to One Heart, and then we'd be fine.
Well, thank you for bringing that information. We'll open the floor for questions.
So there's distance, and then there's the distance of a lap, but then there's also frequency, I'm assuming?
Yes.
So if we were to, we could do either one, right? Reduce the number of laps, or reduce how much we traverse in terms of length.
We could do that, yeah. It kind of makes more sense though to do it takes 30 to 40 minutes to do the one lap. So, some people might have a beer or something and be ready to go, and so it keeps, circling, but you could have it go, less laps around.
Okay, yeah,
But we can talk about that once we get it back, and make sure, that it's just the batteries need replacing, and we'll see.
Is there any warranty on, this isn't a very old vehicle?
The batteries were 12 months, and so we are far over it. We got it in March 16th of 2020.
Yeah, right before COVID hit.
It was right then. So,
So we're gonna have to replace the batteries every 18 months?
I think if we don't push it, it's hard. He said we really were pushing it hard over and over and over and over, and because we had no trouble making that lap when we did a shorter amount. I think it wears the batteries down quicker if we push it.
I think you had a question.
Do you have an estimate on the cost of replacing the batteries?
No, that's what I was waiting for today.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I will let you know.
Do you need our permission, or can we just entrust you with making a loop based upon your experience? I don't think.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so if we authorize the batteries, can this just be done and you go
Yes.
do what you're good at? Okay.
Yes.
That being said, it might be a good idea if we could figure out some way to get down to the Brunswick or the library, just for the parking decks. And it doesn't have to be every single lap. It can be the start or the finish. But just for the perception that we're trying to get people to and from parking might be helpful. But I'll leave that up to you.
All right, thanks.
And you can deal with the merchants as well.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, Kate, looks like we have one question.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Just from a sustainable point of view, I'd be, it's awfully wasteful. I mean, I don't know what happens to these batteries. I'm way down in the weeds here, but if we're going to commit to an electronic vehicle, even with them, I mean, what happens to it? How is this recycled so that the harmful products that are in these batteries don't end up in the landfill or something? So just
Well, Josh, I don't really know the answer. I would assume that the specialty car people would take care of that, but I can check to see how they dispose of them.
If we're really focused on making sure that we're sustainable and that we're green, then we need to, even if it costs more, we need to make sure that these batteries are properly recycled wherever they go.
This here says they recycle car batteries, other types of batteries, so.
Yeah. But I mean, how do they recycle them?
We can have them find that out.
Okay, I'll find out.
Mayor, one quick.
There are government standards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mayor, one quick question. I guess as you talk to the vendor is in the company, did they give you any indications that we could upgrade the batteries for a longer longevity, or different types of batteries that could?
The manufacturer did not. One of my staff members
handling this with staffing with overtime because we were still trying to figure out what we would do and how many hours. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, for our trial, you know that Cameron drove it, and that was, I guess, we did a month or 6 weeks, and because we were slower coming off of COVID, then I could fit his hours in with that schedule. But once we started getting busy over there, and we had someone from Public Works driving it, they racked up quite a bit of overtime, and I mean to the tune of maybe over $3,000. Is that right? Yeah. So that was, we were kind of thinking if we're going to use this all the time, that maybe we should just hire somebody who specifically drives it, and on the night they can't, then my staff person could do it. But come up with something that's not costing us so much overtime.
Question, are you calculating, or is there any calculation for the return on the investment? How many people you're picking up, are you buying?
During the
spending
better
money?
months, when it's light and it was warmer, we were full. I was on it one night, I think it was the first week of October, and I mean, they came out of cultivation and filled all the seats, and they dropped me off back at Thrasher, but as it got colder and darker earlier, it dwindled to like some nights no one. So then you thought, oh, this is really, we're paying out a lot for nobody to ride. So I think we should look at
Seasonal.
Seasonal.
yes.
Yeah.
And I guess we may ask Pat later on about the legality of serving a couple of businesses and how we're
Right.
investing city dollars there. We'll talk about that offline. Okay?
Thank you.
Let's move to board appointments, which we will discuss in exec. Let's move to item G, city manager report. Karen?
I'll be brief, Mayor, council members. This afternoon I sent you a report showing the status of 7 of our key city funds and comparing year-to-date against the prior year. I just mentioned for the public, what we started doing about a month ago is posting line item detail on a monthly basis on our website. So if you go to Administrative Services Department, under budget reports, it's my intent that each month we'll draw that full level of detail straight out of the financial system. It's something we can do quickly, easily, and it gives the public access to not just the funds that you budget, but for example, the DDA fund is in there, and some of the funds that we don't talk about too often, so they get the full picture of everything. But as I said in my comment today, year to date we look good in all the funds. 2 weeks ago we talked about how much excess fund balance we have at the end of last year, and as I indicated today, talking to the auditor Thursday night, it's not $2 million, it's $2.6 million. The audit is not done, but I think that really points to something that one or more of you have said, which is need to be tighter at the front end of the budget process, because what we're doing is set aside excess money. It isn't spent. That's great news at the end of the year, but you could have been using that money for something that delivers services as opposed to setting money aside in case we need it. So I think we'll take a sharper look at the budget as we go forward in the next year's budget process, just to make sure that you know what you have money to spend on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any questions, Cal? Okay, we will move to, I think I mentioned board appointments already. We'll move to item H, items for discussion. And I know the council has invested a lot of time reading these issues ahead of tonight, so we will keep questions to a minimum. Who's taking this first presentation?
I believe it's me.
Okay.
I think I have the first 3 items. Good evening.
Me?
The first item before you is a request
request to approve funding for additional lighting and cameras at Kaboom Playground. The background on this is that damages to Kaboom Playground at Summer Hour Park caused by park visitors necessitates the need for additional deterrent and apprehension measures. Studies have shown that proactive communications with those who frequent the park, increased lighting, and greater surveillance helps prevent criminal behavior in areas where this type of behavior occurs. We've had conversations with staff at Summer Hour Middle School. I personally, with Dr. Looney on several occasions, we've created a really good partnership there on exchanging information to include future liaison, I guess is the best way to say that, with our newly selected community outreach officer. I'll use this opportunity to tell you that his name is Jonathan Reyes, who was selected last week. So Officer Reyes will begin that capacity soon and will liaise with Summer Hour Middle School as well as the soccer league director in order to help promote the collaborative effort of information sharing to include, and this probably is the most important thing, educating students, athletes, and their families on the importance of taking care of our facilities. Summer Hour Park currently has multiple surveillance cameras, however none are close enough to the playground to adequately capture the criminal behavior that has occurred. The lighting in the area is adequate except for the playground, so we need to add lighting there for more direct coverage and greater nighttime surveillance with closer views. So, therefore, additional lighting and cameras are needed. Firefly and Convergent are our current city contract vendors, and their recommendation is to add 2 light poles on the outside of the current fenced-in area, 1 camera pole in the middle that will have a 4-lens camera. The rest of it is in your packet. The total cost for all of that is $24,607.59. We would like approval from council to take that from automated schools and speed detection program funds.
Thank you, Bill. Certainly appreciate your presentation. Council, do we have any questions on this?
I'll wait for them, but I just want to get the queue here.
Okay. Yeah.
Just one question. Is the area locked at night? The playground?
There.
No, the fence is about 6 feet.
Yeah.
It's right
So
up.
it's not high enough, and it's not, are we keeping people out or?
No, not in that part. That's in the back of me.
Chief, they're literally taking our fence.
That's why I was hesitant to say. And so the damage has been to many things, but mostly to the fence itself. And so it's become so costly that they're not even replacing it right now, so we can get some other measures in place.
The fence is only basically there to keep the kids in, right?
From running
I would
across
say
the
it's
street,
to keep
correct.
the little kids in and
Yeah.
not the
Big ones.
Big kids out.
Any other questions? Where are the dollars coming from?
automated school zone speed detection program.
Yes, so Mayor, as you know, this is on Summer Hour. Our property rights are going to expire in about 2 years, unless we extend it. We've successfully worked with the BOE on Hanson, Price, and Mitchell. I don't know what the sentiments might have been for extending Summer Hour, but I hope nobody's paying attention to this meeting. This could be a carrot to extend if we're going to spend this kind of money, because otherwise we will we'll just leave it there. We have the right to, in the lease agreements, to take the Kaboom stuff with us, but I'm told by Public Works that never works out.
We certainly take the cameras and the equipment because
We can certainly do that.
Repurposed for sure.
Certainly do that. But if we make it a safer area, better, maybe that would encourage them to cooperate.
Mayor, respond to that.
Councilman?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that condition. However, I do feel like the next steps for me at least is that we need to secure the public safety as quickly as possible. But I do like we can walk and chew gum at the same time, so to speak. So I think we could do both, where we can start planning ahead for this. I mean, this stuff's not, maybe Chief has this stuff in storage, but probably got to order it. So it's gonna take some time to get here, but we can start having that conversation immediately as one council member's position. But I think in parallel, we should start securing that area.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, Pat, are you suggesting that we use this as a negotiating tool? So we would go to them and we'd say, we'd like to extend the lease, and we would like to
And
put
in
this
doing so,
security.
yeah, I think we'll improve the security of the property, and we're doing so.
Right.
And whoever's gonna do the negotiating, I haven't been very successful in going through the lawyer to get it done, but I think when you go to DOE, I think there's more attention paid to these issues. So,
Okay. Well, two quick things. I don't think we should be in the business of dismantling parks in our city, number one. Number two, I've had preliminary negotiations with the Board of Education, and general consensus to, at the end of the lease, to extend it. That's where we are right now. So I will continue with those conversations with the Board of Education.
Yes.
And again, I spoke with the Chief Operating Officer and the Superintendent.
So our lease ends in 2 years?
roughly,
Right?
June 24.
June
Something like that.
24? And can we in the process of you contacting them, could you suggest that we just extend that lease now?
I did have that conversation. Their preference is to wait until the end of the lease.
Right.
Then extend it.
So maybe this is a little bit of an opportunity to get those wheels moving a little faster. We'd like to put money into this park, but we can't do it if we only have a 2-year window. Can we have a 4-year window?
Yeah, I can certainly continue that conversation. Good suggestion. Okay, Chief, next item.
All right, second item before you tonight is the surplus vehicles request. We are requesting council's permission to surplus 10 vehicles, 7 patrol vehicles that have reached end of life, and 3 court-awarded vehicles that were either abandoned or seized under the Civil Forfeiture Act. No cost. In fact, I hope to gain some from the sale of these vehicles.
That's pretty straightforward, council. Any questions? Okay, let's move to the next item. Yours also?
Yes, sir. The third item before you is the replacement of the Citywide weather/alert siren system. The background on this is that there are currently 10 weather alert sirens across the city, controlled by a very old piece of manually operated hardware attached to a dot matrix printer. I paused for that laugh, thank you.
Too type, I assume?
Yes, and unfortunately it is required to be attached to the system. Most of the system is over 20 years old, and unfortunately continued failures happen more and more frequent. In April of last year, we obtained a quote just to replace the parts that haven't been replaced due to failures recently. That quote was $76,375. However, since April of last year, we have had even more failures. So we put out an RFP, kind of skipping ahead here, to obtain bids to replace the entire system from ground up, minus the poles themselves, unless they need it. The new system that we wanted was something controlled by a modern piece of software and hardware connected to the National Weather System and capable of automatic activation for certain major events and system tests, which is pretty common for all new systems. We gave submitting vendors 2 options. Option 1 would be a voice and tone siren system, which is what we have now, or option 2, which would be tone only. We received 5 bids, and after a question and answer session with the bidders, skipping to the end here, we believe that a voice and tone system like we have now would be needed. I think it would be what our residents and business owners are accustomed to. Of the 5 bids, Wide range, 196,295 all the way to 332,068.53. The lowest responsible bidder was Acoustic Technology Inc. with their bid amount of 196,295. We are requesting approval of that amount from the Automated School Zone Speed Detection Program, which is in line with public safety initiatives.
Hey, Councilmember Hickson, I think you have a question.
No, I thought I heard a bird chirping, I'm sorry.
There's some kind of feedback.
Okay, maybe that's it.
I heard it over there.
I think it's a computer tone.
Okay.
I was there last week and I heard
Was
it.
it Bill?
Well, I do have a quick question then.
Councilmember Gainer.
Oh, go ahead.
The $100,000 that we budgeted for, none of that's been spent yet?
That's correct.
So you've got $100,000 that you're budgeting, and you just need 96,000, round numbers more, or you need 196,000 more?
The first thing you said.
Okay.
So we budgeted 100,000. We need an extra
We
96.
need another 96 to
That's
do it.
correct.
So that's the additional spend, unanticipated spend is 96.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mayor?
Yes.
A question here, how do we, first, or it's two questions, maybe more, but we have 10, we're gonna replace 10. Did we do an analysis to ensure that 10 is the number? Like, do we need the 11th one or the 12th one? I know the system was built a long time ago and we've had some annexation since then.
Yes is the answer. I'll go with the second part and then the first part. The second part, as far as annexation, that was covered when we did the annexation in 2012. Is that right?
Okay.
We added them then, and all of the vendors, when they submitted their bid, looked at the city again, and no one proposed it anymore. So they talked about that in their bid.
Perfect. Second question is there a way to tie that into our, I don't know what the new system is called, where you get the automatic alerts to your phone? Knowing that we're in the age of technology, you got your music blasted in your ears, you may not hear it, but just like how we have Amber Alerts, everyone's phone just stops and the whole room lights up. Is there an ability to add that feature either by location or by sign-in?
I don't want to misspeak here. Let me get a firm answer to that, but I believe that this one that we have chosen or we're recommending does allow for that through some sort of an app. I don't know that it would, if you were suggesting, does it tie into our civic, what's it called? Civic Ready program? I don't know that that was specifically asked for, but we can ask that. It's a good question.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Chief, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, let's move to item 4, budget amendment to cover the replacement.
Mayor,
No, sorry.
I'll take that.
That's yours?
I'll take that. And as Bill leaves, the good news is, well, the bad news is that we had a wrecked vehicle. The good news is that we received over $39,000 reimbursement for insurance purposes, and the replacement vehicle costs less. So what we're asking you to do is the cost, $35,500, the cost for the replacement vehicle has already been charged to the police department budget. So Finance is recommending that you increase revenues by $35,500 and increase the police department budget by that same amount. And the difference that we received is just additional general fund revenue.
Makes sense. Any questions, council? Very good. Let's move to item 5, community work program report. Tracy, accomplishments modified.
Remember back at your January retreat that I, along with department heads, started walking you through report of accomplishments for our community work program that occurred in our 2019 comprehensive plan, and we agreed to bring back the last 20 items or so to you because we ran out of time that day devoted to this project. We continue to write up what we're doing with the same document on the report of accomplishments and show you what the new report for the community work program would look like for the next several years. those would be combined into those umbrella items as part of the larger projects. So if you'd like, and I know we have a full agenda, but when we were going through it, I think we stopped at SQ 31 and would like to do a quick run through of SQ 32, I think up to SQ 57. And most of those items actually run under William's purview, and he could give you sort of a background of why he thought those items were where they were. And if you want, he can go through those quickly, or we can leave them for you to digest over the next 2 weeks with any questions you may have.
Council, what's your pleasure?
Got a big agenda. My pleasure would be only to discuss the ones that are no longer valid.
No longer valid?
Yeah, the ones that were taken off the list, just to hear those out. Everything else that's ongoing, we've already approved those in the past.
In the previous. Okay. Is that agreeable?
How many do we have that are coming off?
4, 5,
7.
7.
So
Now
no,
let's start with William's item SQ
Well, even if
35.
you would come up, y'all can tag team this.
Absolutely.
What number was that, 55?
SQ 35.
35 to 55.
So SQ 35, establish entrepreneur innovation hub, development locations to be determined. This item is being addressed by the chamber and the county, and could be repetitive for us, so we considered removing that item because of those reasons. The SQ 38, aggressive film, TV, and creative business recruitment along Future Industrial Boulevard, 85 Activity Center, character areas to help fill vacant office space. Explore Gannett does a really good job handling this, and we suggested removing that. SQ 40, 41, and 42, those are the next ones. SQ 40 is holding an annual media roundtable luncheon to increase relationships with Metro Atlanta media professionals to garner more positive and earned media coverage for Norcross. The city does reach out to the media via other modes. The roundtable luncheon, we did not consider that to be an effective mode. SQ 41, Federal Opportunity Zone Strategic Plan and Investor Outreach to direct investors to project opportunities. I do this, in the course of my duties. However, the federal opportunity zones are not what we thought they would be in terms of the redevelopment tool. We found that would likely be no longer necessary as part of our community work program. And SQ 42.
But just a quick question, has anybody taken us up on the federal opportunity zone? With zero takers?
Correct.
You're on 42?
No, we're on 42, one more, yeah. This is complete annual scorecard report. That's complete at the federal level. Now we move to number 54, excuse me. Explore college university satellite office to assist more residents in obtaining certificates in higher education degrees. We were just curious if we had the capacity to work on this. Is this even possible post-COVID, given the timeline of where we are in the current 5-year process. Finally, SQ 55, administer Norcross Schoolhouse Rock PR campaign to highlight and promote area schools to overcome negative perceptions. We recommended to remove that.
But it is worthy of noting that we are working with several schools now through their 3D programs to work with them on common problems we face and giving them a little more exposure through those means. So it's not like we're abandoning anything with the schools. It's just these programs may no longer suit our purposes and may not be as beneficial.
Thank you.
Any other?
Is
that the last one?
That's the last, no longer, the language is recommended.
Okay. Any other questions of council at this time?
So we'll get an updated document, all the ones that are removed now?
Absolutely. There's
Thank you.
there's a tentative one in the back, and then we'll say that that's no longer our tentative one and present to you for adoption.
Great.
The only one that
Thank you.
gives me pause is the Bruce referred to. That's a tremendous opportunity for the city specifically singled out, along with a portion of Peachtree Corners on government, as an economic opportunity. But we'll talk about that later.
What was your question though? I'm sorry.
How were we presenting it to?
Oh, yeah, that's part of the tool package. That was part of the toolkit as I present, to different opportunities. When people call me or, they'd like to do a project, or they're thinking about something, or they're having an investor, or the state or partnership with that calls, which they often do. That's one of the benefits that I list. That's one of our kind of incentives, if you will, is a federal opportunity zone. But the challenge is it's kind of a convoluted process, and a lot of the investments have been made, like in streets prior. We're kind of a little late in the stage at this point.
Councilmember Hickson.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we haven't had much luck in the greater Norcross area, CID either, marketing those. I think maybe we've had one parcel that wanted to come in and add investment, and it is a convoluted process, and we haven't seen much luck with it either. Although, we're not a full government, so we work with the county.
Okay, any other questions on this matter, council? Well, thank you both for the presentation. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's move to item 6, alcoholic beverage ordinance, Madison Chucky.
Hello. So I am presenting a recommendation to update our current alcohol ordinance. I've been working with John Underwood to add our special events into the current ordinance. So it would include any special events that occur in the downtown dining district and or on city property. This would eliminate staff coming to you all multiple times throughout the year with the resolutions that we've been doing.
Very good move. Council, any questions on this issue?
This only pertains to the downtown?
It's the downtown dining district and any city-owned property. So it would include Pinnacle, anything city-owned outside of the dining district. Streets, parks.
Thank you.
Any other? Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. Let's move to number 7, electric infrastructure cost recovery. We've got Steve White.
Good evening. Yes, I have two. So the first one is the electrical infrastructure cost recovery. Norcross Power has been providing infrastructure for developers as well as just single home builders, kind of as a source of an incentive for years. Ever since I started here, we've just been paying for that infrastructure. Currently, Norcross Power is one of the only, if not the last, utility offering this kind of benefit. It's straining our budget. We really can't sustain the process further because it's just costing us so much. Due to supply chain, labor issues, material costs and lead times, this kind of renders this type of recovery necessary so that we can stay whole during the process of trying to get some of these developments installed without just totally eliminating our operating budget. So we're asking council to approve a measure to allow the utility to acquire construction drawings from Tracy or her group whenever somebody submits a development plan, so that we can come up with the cost, so that we can get those funds prior to any material being ordered or any site work to begin.
Councilmember Myers?
I just want to make sure I got this clear. I agree with you 100%. I think this is probably something we should definitely do. The cost of the process, I guess, is where I have the more questions. So Tracy's group would get the plans, you would then provide an estimate to the developer for them to be able to pay for it, and then we would install it. We'd still install it, right?
We would install it, or we would have contractors do it if it's a big job and we're busy with other projects, kind of like we've been
we had two different apartment complexes coming in along with some other issues on Beaufort Highway, but one way or the other, it would be covered.
It would be covered by the development?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Gainer.
Can you explain what you mean by infrastructure?
So underground, because typically all the development now is underground. So it would be underground transformers, it would be the cable, it would be service wire, unless it's like the apartments, they provide their own service wire going from the transformer into their panels inside. So really, it consists of the installation, it would be transformers, secondary junction boxes, secondary wire, primary wire.
So, just to follow up on that, say a development is going to require more capacity on feeder lines
that exist?
Yeah. Would that be part of this, that you would have, we would do that?
Well, it's going to be, so we only use up to half of our two substations so that we can acquire redundancy whenever we have to run off one station.
Yeah, you're backing it all the way to the substation. I'm thinking about whatever lines are feeding it on the street.
Yeah, so I would say we would know beforehand if there was enough room or not, enough capacity on our, say, our 336 cable. Typically there's a lot, we have a lot left, I'll say that much, even with two substations. But that would be part of the engineering portion, is to make sure.
And the intention is to charge for that infrastructure as well?
Yes, any infrastructure that's going to be on that property, yes.
Any other questions? Yes. Thank you, Steve. You have the next one also?
I do.
Norcross power rate?
Yeah, this is actually just a recommendation to suspend our rates being increased this year until we can get a rate study done with the election cities of Georgia in the next probably 2 to 3 months.
Okay, we will open the floor for questions on that. Looks like we have it.
That's all good.
Very good, very good.
Excuse me, I have a question. It's more of a comment on the power rates. So my understanding is that there's an automatic rate increase built in over a certain amount of time that that was approved once some years ago and is continuing. This is a freeze, but it doesn't end the automatic increase.
It does. It stops it.
So are we at the end of that period? Or
No,
what?
if you look at the recommendation, if I can help Steve here, the second part of the recommendation is direct that future rate increases be considered as part of the city's annual budget process. That came out of one of our lunch and learns.
Yep.
So I'm glad you asked the question. So specifically, in 2019, I think November 2019, you authorized multiple years increases of 1.9% effective in January, which will show up in the February bill. I contact with Steve, make sure I don't get anything wrong. What we heard from one of those lunch and learns was, first of all, it ought to come up during the budget process when you're deciding other revenues. And then based on the analysis that was done, ECG showed us that we can forego having an increase this year. Just recognize not having a rate increase this year reduces the revenue in every subsequent year, because every subsequent year's increase that ECG had calculated and recommended back in 2019 built on every prior one. So, this has an ongoing impact, not just an impact between now and January, but
So just to capstone that, what we're saying is that from now on, if we need a rate increase, it'll be council's job annually to review that and decide whether or not a rate increase is warranted.
Yes, sir.
Rather than having something for 5 years that's already just baked in.
And the reason they were looking at doing that is they were trying to get away from variable and get more fixed. When they were trying to make that process, but that may not be what y'all are wanting to do. So I think that's why they were doing that.
Yeah, the rates, and what about the rates for off-peak?
So we just received some information, and are you talking about for electric vehicle rates?
Well, that would be the use.
Yeah.
But I think it's an off-peak is an off-peak, right?
So I think the key there is that we need to understand how we'll collect the data to offer someone a off-peak rate in the middle of the night to charge an electric vehicle. We need to know how we collect it at the source. We need to know how it works into our billing system. And so I think we need to work through the mechanics of being able to tell you how you can do that before we suggest that you set a rate structure and someone comes in next week and says, I've got an electric vehicle, I want that reduced rate. And then at that point, we have to figure out how to make sure that the information gets to the meter, from the meter to our billing system, and shows up on someone's bill.
So I'd recommend that it would be much simpler if we follow the way Georgia Power does it and other ECGs do it. What is it called, Jackson? EMCs.
Yeah.
Where they just have they have two rate structures, a fixed rate or a variable rate. You elect one or the other. The variable rate says that after a certain time and before a certain time, the rate drops. So it's a true off-peak. I don't care whether you're heating your water or charging your vehicle or whatever you're doing with the power, deciding to air condition only those hours, whatever is your choice. And then take the hit on the other side where there is a higher rate during the peak hours. So right now our rate is a single rate blended across the whole thing. And what I'm suggesting is that we offer or investigate how we could structure a second rate structure for a residential I'm talking about, that gives them the alternative to go with an off-peak rate and a peak rate.
And that's what other utilities do. It's a TOU, time of use.
Yep.
They'll have a peak and off-peak, and for electric charging, a super off-peak, which is 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I talked to an individual that Mary Beth and I have had a discussion with as a possible consultant to the city on this, and I asked that question of him earlier today, and he said we'd actually be kind of on the cutting edge if we looked at not requiring you to pay more to air condition your house at 4 o'clock in the afternoon during the peak demand time in the summer in order to get this, the super off-peak rate from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. year-round. So I think we can talk about both, but the first thing is to make sure. I suspect our tankless meters can handle time of day.
Yeah, you have to have AMI, and so we have that. So yeah, we have everything. We need.
So what we're looking at may be a little bit more complicated if we need to be able to capture just the circuit that's going to the vehicle in the garage.
I think that's
as
too
opposed to all
complicated.
usage. But
I think that's too complicated. I think let's keep it simple. That was my suggestion.
Pleasure of the council.
Okay, so it looks like we want
Options.
yeah, you have options, but it looks like we won't be able to have that information by the next council meeting.
I think it's two separate things. I think this
Well, that's
is
why it's not part of
yeah,
tonight.
Yeah, so this is two things, and I think I don't know
Let's
anyone.
keep the conversation and discussion.
Yeah, so this is two things, and that other piece was the third.
Yes.
It was a part of the same request, but it's a third adder to the request. We can come. You're going to bring this back to us, the third option.
We'll come back next month.
The third piece to that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, Thrasher Park Playground. Mary Beth?
Council, okay?
Thrasher Park Playground.
Josh.
It's
Mr. Mayor, should I give a little intro?
Councilmember Beers.
We were, my family.
I'm going to call you because your name was on.
My family we went down, I had a work conference down in Orlando, and so we drove through Gainesville, Florida, and we went and we hung out a little bit in Gainesville, and I found myself, with kids, you pull up Google and you type in playgrounds, and you just see if you see any cool pictures of, an alluring looking playground for a treat for the kids. And so we found this amazing park that they had just completed right there close to downtown Gainesville. And the playground equipment, and it was themed really nicely because there's a giant power plant next door, and so the playground equipment was sort of themed to go along with the power station, and so it was really neat because it was an unusual playground. The kids had a blast playing around. There was big sun shales and so on, and it just got me thinking about Thrasher and how it's so loved and so well used by so many kids, from families from one end of our community to the other, and so I just got to thinking that that's a marketing tool for us. In addition to being an exercise facility and all the other great things that a playground is, it's also a marketing tool for us. And so I just reached out to Eric, and he reached out to Mary Beth about how long had those toys been in place, and it turns out 13 years. And so I would suggest that the council consider replacing them. And I expect by the time we got around to replacing them, they'd be at 14 years, and so sort of a good time frame if you ask me.
So what action should we expect at the next council meeting?
I would think that we would be, I don't know if it takes council action to authorize staff to go out for RFP or RFQ, to go out to start to compile some quotes. And I don't know if we need to pull in a designer first, or if it's sort of all inclusive when you're doing these playgrounds. I would defer to Mary Beth for what her experience has been when we redone playgrounds before.
Seems like something we should just kick it over to the Parks and Green Space Committee.
Yeah.
Their name's on the plaque there now, but do you know how long playgrounds typically last like this? Because I remember I went over to Stone Mountain, the one I played with on my 13th birthday, still there. It's still as bad as it was then.
Yeah, I mean, we really should probably develop a policy where all city playgrounds are looked at some kind of a frequency, but I thought certainly the Thrasher Park being our most used kids park, and most, from a marketing perspective, certainly one that's going to draw people in to where they spend time in town and spend money, that one might even need to be on a more frequent basis to be refreshed.
Okay, let's be clear. It looks like this won't be something that we vote on at the next council meeting.
I think staff would just need direction whether or not council has a will to move forward with the replacing it.
Yeah, okay. I have a will to move forward with the quote, just to understand what's the cost implications. But also would be interested if staff could come back with a policy on a review process of our playground equipment, or our equipment in this case, to what's the lifespan should they be, so we could use it. I mean, I'm sure it's a capital expense, so we'd want to at least have a policy around reviewing that, so we would know how to pull the trigger without us going to Gainesville, Florida. Right?
Go Gators.
So if we turn this to staff and Parks and Green Space to come back with a proposal in time for the budget, is that kind of the time frame that you're thinking?
Sounds good to me, yeah.
Seems like
I would have staff
makes
work
sense.
with the Parks and Green. Are you just like
What I'm
total
saying.
replacement?
Yeah, total replacement.
Just replacing, or add,
reimagining. It's not.
Reimagining is a lot different than replacement.
Well, I'm not talking about bringing the same toys and playground equipment in. It's bringing in something that's new.
Just a refresh of the park.
Right. Refresh.
Yeah, I'm happy with staff, and I think staff has their pulse on this a little bit better than we do. And I'm happy with just kicking it back to the Parks and Green Space and staff. And
yeah, that sounds.
I mean, it could be something we look out till SPLOST, and just that's something we talk about in the SPLOST discussion.
Yeah.
Well, Parks and Green Space has submitted a list of things to Eric, ideas for SPLOST. We could maybe add that as an action item to investigate what that would come up, what that would cost, and add it to the list.
I mean, ultimately, isn't our decision through the budgeting process to state our values, because it's our value document, and we have to weigh. Thrasher Park was one of the best investments I've ever made. We spent $890,000 on it. So I don't know what percentage of that was the playground equipment, because we did a lot of work there. But let's say the playground equipment is $100,000. We have to weigh where that $100,000 is going versus, well, can we get a lot in East Norcross or maybe over off Stevens? And I mean, at what point do we weigh this project versus some other projects that the Parks and Green Space Committee has come up with.
So I think that was the intention,
Okay.
that there's a list, and it's not a list that says, these are things we have to do.
Okay.
And it's not prioritized at all, it's just a list, which then comes to council, for council to vet, decide whether those things are valid, and to prioritize those things to decide, which ones would make more sense in the short term versus long. So
But I agree with everything you said.
No one's trying to usurp
Yeah.
council's,
Well,
oversight on this.
ultimately, we have to raise our hand for money too. Although this is timely, someone contacted Matt and I today about having ping pong courts in Thrasher Park. Kid you not.
Paintball?
Ping pong.
I just think that it's important for us to evaluate our parks, not just from servicing the community for the kids' needs, but also how this has an economic impact, as was identified by that's how me and my family do it. I'm sure other families do it a different way, but I mean, we look for parks and then that pulls us to wherever.
Staff can, I agree, weigh that. I'm sure that there's some sort of data that shows.
Okay, it sounds like we've given staff clear direction on this issue. For policy, the lifespan, and the other issues that have been discussed. So we will follow up on this issue. When?
The budget process, it sounds like.
Budget process, okay?
We're gonna expect, so
But there could be a
DGT.
policy brought to us before that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna have a retreat too, so somewhere in there.
Another retreat?
So we're gonna do a budget retreat.
Yeah, I agree. That's the one.
We do have one for the future. Okay, let's move to item 10, reclassification of existing position. Aaron?
Yes, sir. So, as I indicated, we had a discussion of this position during the discussion of the city manager's budget. Some concerns have been expressed about the process, so in an abundance of caution, I just suggest that you consider this position. It is budgeted. It's not very different. If you were interested, I have both the old job description, the new. They're very similar. Probably the biggest difference between the two is that there are a couple different situations that drive a reclassification. One is you have a vacant position and you look at kind of revisiting needs and identify what might be the requirements. And the other is what happened previously with the same position. You have a great staff member, they show their capabilities, they develop skills and experience, and you decide that they're capable of doing more, and you reclassify the position to basically provide a promotional opportunity for an incumbent. And we have done both of those in the past, we'll do both of those in the future. In this case, we had a vacant position, and the former position, as I mentioned last summer, reflected some very specific skills to support the tree board, and that's because the incumbent was doing exactly that. As I indicated in some backup, I've given you backup here and I sent you an email since. I think the key here is we now have an arborist who's got a master's in forestry. He's the best person to be dealing with the tree board. So what I'd like to do is to take some of those specifics that were reflected in the older position, have a more generic. We have people that have applied for this job, as I mentioned last July. This frequently is a career path for someone that wants to be a city manager. They start as an assistant too. Usually they have the education but lack experience. They get the opportunity to, if you follow someone around, see the relationship that you have with the outside world and departments. And usually the next position is an assistant city manager, frequently at another jurisdiction. But that may be someone that ultimately comes back as your future city manager. So it's a typical career path. I think we have numerous applicants. I've resisted looking at the applications until we clarify this, but again, we discussed this during the summer. At the same time, we talked about adding new positions, and but again, I want to resolve any concerns over the appropriate path, and I'll leave for the future the discussion of what my authority is under the charter, because I interpret that I have this authority, but I'm not. That's not the only opinion about how to interpret the charter. So I'm just asking tonight to reclass this.
Thank you for that presentation. Any comments from council?
I have a question. The original job description is not here. I can't compare.
Correct.
And on the attachments, it says Eric Johnson's objectives for 2022. That has no bearing to me on the reclassification
Sure.
of an existing position.
Yeah, that was an error. The correct attachment is attached. And the reason for not showing both is that really what it takes to process a reclassification typically is a company like the one that we brought in to do our salary survey. They look at job descriptions, they assess what the appropriate pay grade is. It's not something that most of us are trained to do, and this position was one that was shared with Evergreen when they did our salary study, because at that point I believe that we approved it when we approved the budget in August, and so they did look at the classification and came up with a pay grade for it.
So this will move to the regular session for approval. Any comments or concerns?
I've got copies of both job descriptions, so I'll give you each one now. Thank you.
I guess I'm one of the ones who brought up some concerns. My concerns were simply transparency and ensuring that we follow the charter in discussing this in a public session.
So is there an indication that we were not following the charter?
That my concern that this was not a reclassification, but a creation of a new position, simply because of the job descriptions. There were changes in the reporting structure. The assistance to council was removed. The essential responsibilities were changed. The educational work component, one was required a GED, the other position requires a BA. The core competencies are different from the two positions, so there were significant changes.
I have another question. What was the old salary on the special projects manager?
I think it's along the lines of 40, given 40, response for the reclassification. So this position starts at 43, which would have been around the same of the old position.
Okay, so we'll move this forward to the regular session.
Mayor, if I may, did we have legal weigh in on that, on the charter, aspect of the charter in terms of what it reads? I don't know if you've even seen this or not.
Yeah, and Eric and I had a discussion on this as well. So the provision 2.31, which created the city manager, allocated certain powers and authorities for the city manager to do certain things, which one of them is one of the powers is to appoint, and when he or she deems it necessary for the good of the city, suspend or remove all city employees, administrative officers as he sees fit. Of course, the opening line, and it is the most important one, which I demurred in giving you. The city manager shall be the chief executive administrative officer of the city. Okay? And then it goes on to this business about that they have the ability to appoint and misappoint and then direct and supervise the administration of all departments, offices, and agencies. However, the charter previously had in it, when this was installed, it didn't change, 310, that reserves to mayor and council the power to, and I'm quoting now, establish, abolish, merge, or consolidate offices, positions, or employment departments and agencies of the city as necessary for the proper administration of the affairs and government of the city. So you've got issues. None of these mention reclassifications. Okay, but is there authority for either the city manager or mayor and council under 310, an earlier provision that was not changed, when the city manager's position was created and put in the charter, okay? Roberts, or whoever did it, had the ability to make changes and harmonize these, perhaps, if you will. And that wasn't done. It's my opinion that you could use either one of these tangents to authorize what the city manager is suggesting, is advocating. You could use the mayor council to take control of it, or you got the CEO, CFO rubric, which is extant based upon the earlier creation of the city manager position.
So if I was to understand you correctly, our charter states that either city manager and or mayor and council has the authority to do.
Here's how it works. After it goes into the chief executive and administrative officer of the city, that is created, which is what the city manager is, goes on under 1 and 2 to appoint, and when he or she deems necessary for the good of the city, suspend, remove all city employees, administrative officers as he or she appoints, except, and then this is right in the 2.31 that created the section that created that in the city manager position, except as otherwise provided by law or personal ordinances adopted pursuant to this charter. So it seems to be thinking about 2.10, which gives that authority to mayor and council under a different set of definitions than the definitions here. We don't have a reclassification for either one. So,
yeah, that's what I'm hearing. It seems like they're in conflict.
You know what? I'm not sure they are. They don't conflict with each other. They just are on two different rails. And I don't know what the thinking was because nobody asked me. But what do we do with 310? That's the one where you got the power for mayor and council. What do we do with this if we're going to enact this? And which probably should have been considered. But here's one of the things that I've since. These things are generally established through ordinances, which the city manager and the mayor council have the ability to create. In section 125, or 2-125, and that's an ordinance reference, it says this. This is the ordinance which is extant, and both of these talk about creating ordinances. Nothing contained in this article shall prevent the consolidation at the mayor and council's discretion of one or more of the city departments. Nothing contained herein shall prevent one individual from acting as a department head in one or more city departments, subject to the direction of mayor and council. So the first sentence kind of talks about this.
Well, it talks about creation or abolition of departments, basically the organization of the staffing of the city, not individual jobs where in there.
Well, what I just read is an extant ordinance that says nothing contained in this article shall prevent the consolidation at mayor and council's discretion of one or more of the city departments.
Right, so it's talking about departments, not individuals.
Right, I agree, but nonetheless, it talks about the power of mayor and council once again as regards in an ordinance through which these things are controlled. So it like you said, it talked about departments, and then the other two sections talk about appointments for city manager, and then for mayor and council, it talks about establish, abolish. So both of them can get it done, but they're on two separate rails and two separate authorities.
Councilmember Hicks.
Can we reclassify a position under our current authority right now?
Can you?
Not me, mayor and council.
In my opinion, yes.
So when we vote on this in the next
Yeah.
meeting, it'll be done.
Right.
Then I would
Yeah.
suggest we move forward with this discussion because the position in front of us is not who does it. We can clear that up, I think, at a later date.
Right.
But for today, our discussion is whether or not we should reclassify this position.
The only reason I went off in this.
Oh, I'm happy you did.
Somebody asked me the question.
No, I'm happy you did. I think it gives us some clarification, but we just got a long agenda and.
That was my recommendation, to put that off in the future.
Okay.
But it is a conversation. You're right.
It does sound like it's pretty in-depth.
It is. And the fact that the way the charter the code is written. It's written to give no singular person authority. No single council member, no single mayor, and no single manager total authority. It all has to be, the way that it's written, you have to.
There's a clause in there that retains mayor and council authority over situations like this. Not defined like this, but like this.
That's why you have that may in there, that council member Myers brought up. Okay, so we will move this to the regular agenda. All right, next agenda item is city manager goals and objectives.
Thank you, sir.
Sure, sir.
So at our January meeting, we provided this document towards the camera. And what I've done since then is to look at your items. There were 34 what I've described as deliverables in your third column. I've changed the format in order to lay out the sequence of items under each of the major goals or objectives that were in your original list. What I thought is important is there ought to be a date for every single deliverable, and it wasn't necessarily clear on what I was working from, what date would work. Also recognizing that I worked through a series of departments that have to fit in their part on some of these tasks with other projects that they may be working on. So what I've done is to spread out the deliverable dates over a longer period. Most of these talks at or prior to, so that there's a due date, but that doesn't mean that they may not be delivered a month or 2 months earlier. We have the capability of doing that. I think in one case, I wanted to make sure that you understood that when we talk about developing employee engagement strategies, we have an employee productivity committee to represent your employees. They're led by your HR manager, and so very specifically, I want to make sure that we're going to do a survey of employees, that employee productivity committee is heavily engaged in what we should ask, how we should ask it, how we interpret the results. The challenge with any survey is the return rate, and we want to maximize that. So that's part of what's factored in. In some cases, I don't believe that we have the resources to do these without going out. And so some of these you'll see specifically talk about that the deliverable is presenting you the opportunity in the budget process to consider whether you want to do some of these projects. And a good example is, William went through just the items being taken off his list today, but the number of items that he and Tracy still have are numerous, and to suggest that we have the in-house capability to do an implementation plan for Buford Highway by August, I think, was a little optimistic. And so that's a case where I think it needs to be done through, and Tracy and I have already talked a little bit about it, through a budget item that you have the opportunity to set priorities and say how important this is. I think that one is doable, probably not outrageously expensive, but to get someone that can commit full time to work on that project as opposed to asking staff to try to fit that in among everything else that they're doing. So if there's items that are important that are off the list, I was trying to get to a manageable number since we're talking about what we're going to accomplish between now and October. I will tell you that for me, item 6, strengthening the city's financial management, is critical. And I shared with you today that talking to the city's external auditor last Thursday, we agreed that this audit is not going to be completed with a normal 6-month timeline. There's been a variety of issues. I didn't list them all. But I think that we clearly need to have the resources, and one of the things that I'll ask for during the budget process is the capability to strengthen our budget capability and other aspects of our financial operations. Critical to the success of the city, and an area that I think is in need of additional resources. And got my interim director sitting back there who I think would agree with the challenge of how we're currently staffed to try to address the issues. So that's important to me. There are items that aren't on the list that I will have self-assigned I'm going to pursue. We went online and looked at the homepage, and under I think maybe government category, you'll see the city budget, you'll see that they've started to create what is more of a budget document than we've had in years in terms of laying out more detail that shows the community the resources that they've committed to city operations. Stop talking, we let it answer questions in any direction.
Okay, council, any questions, input, comments? Councilmember Gainer.
The one piece of input I would have is that I think you're on the right track with, there's a lot in here that would require staff engagement that you might not have the necessary resources at your disposal right now to accomplish. And my expectation is that you'd come back to us with, in order to do this, I need that. It could be a piece of software, it could be a building, I don't know. It could be something that, or a position that would be necessary in order to accomplish one of these goals. And at that point, it would be the council to say whether or not it remains a priority that you would fund. That'd be my expectation.
Any other?
Well,
That's good input. Councilmember.
Quick question, you said if they're important, they are off the list. Did I catch that correct, or is that a misstatement?
But if they're important,
Yeah, if they're important, they are off the list?
no. I don't think I said that. There are some things that I have self-identified that I'm going to pursue. Identified issues before you even selected me for this job, and whether they're on your list or not, because in some cases I have a more granular understanding of day-to-day operations. There's some other items that I'm going to assign myself, and financial management is one of those areas. It's an area where we're struggling because we haven't had adequate resources. We haven't had a budget analyst or a fiscal analyst to help our financial staff, and so there's some things that, as I said, whether they're on the list or not, I'm going to pursue because I think it's the right thing to do. And I certainly respect what your priorities are and what you want to accomplish. Just one point, that is, particularly when we get to building Norcross Power's resiliency, there's some sequencing. So one or two of these may not be as quickly as you thought, but we're about to look at our assets, and part of understanding how we build resiliency into the system requires us to have a better understanding of exactly what we have today. The poles, the resetting circuit breakers, I'm not...
Transformers, etc.
And until we really understand, we are doing some of that. We are looking at the capability of doing some of the, okay, now I can't think of the new
spacer
wire.
cables?
The spacer cables. So not all that weights, but some of understanding how we can maximize the resiliency is probably later than you were hoping, because I think it's here in August. But again, I'm putting deadlines with the expectation of, sometimes under promise, over deliver. We don't know what other issues may come before us that we need to take on, but there has to be a due date, and I try to spread these out so that we have at regular intervals coming back with your priorities. So, Councilmember, I don't think I said that, but if I did, that certainly wasn't my intent to say that.
Sounds good. Any other questions, council? Will you be building some sort of matrix so we know what's done, what's not done?
But yes, I think to this point, because I've laid these out as 1.1 and 1.2, what I wanted to do is to give you a reference so that I can tell you as we go where we are. You know that last Thursday we started down that path. We're actually doing part of that tonight with the discussion of the community work program. So this was for me, and it's a different organizational structure than maybe some of you are comfortable with, but I did it intentionally to have dates for every item and the ability to easily reference which items are done. And if I'm going to be late on one, I will let you know as soon as possible, and you ultimately get to assess whether there was a valid reason or not.
Very good.
But this was very valuable, so I appreciate what everyone put into this process.
Good, thanks so much. Any other questions, council?
No.
Moving forward, number 12, policy regarding communications between elected officials and staff. Councilmember Andrew Dixon.
Yeah, I drafted this item. About 2 years, well, before the pandemic, I had reached out to council about our policy regarding texting employees, policies regarding elected official texting employees, just to try to get understanding about what policy we have about that. We don't have a policy. There's no illegality. I don't think that's illegal according to Pat. But I thought it would be worthwhile on Thursday, October 28th, I had emailed out an email to mayor and council at norcrossga.net, and I spelled out what are mayor and council members' clear authorities with regard to day-to-day interactions, suggestions, instructions towards staff, and specifically Eric. So it's not just individual staff members, it's also with Eric. And I think an open discussion about how we communicate as a group, how we all communicate with individual staff members and with Eric warrants a discussion. I had put on here, let me get to my agenda item. One of the things I would like to do, because Eric does report, Eric reports to 6 of us. That's quite clear in our charter. Our charter says he reports to council. However, council is mayor and council through our charter. So it's quite clear that he works for all 6 of us. And there are many times where we will have a question of an individual staff member, and that might be something that Josh or Arlene would be interested in learning about. And there's an opportunity for us to communicate that, but it all needs to be channeled through the city manager. As such, I would suggest that we have some sort of policy that all communication via email just required to copy the city manager on. I think that's an appropriate thing. I think it's happening pretty much right now, but I think that we would also benefit from codifying it into our ordinances. So that's kind of my preamble to it. Happy to discuss what might need to be done and how it can look going forward. I also think that we should empower the city manager to regulate how his staff interacts with us, how we keep questions informal. So, for example, I have texted the city manager, "Are you available?" I have texted the city manager, "Do I have a link available?" Those are the type of texts that I often will text with the city manager. Occasionally, I'll text primarily Tracy Fry or Mary Beth about, is this, what do you know about this, or how do you know about that? Never policy discussions. And I know Mary Beth keeps us abreast of big issues via text, and it's very helpful. So having a policy built up around when it is appropriate and how we go about it, I think is beneficial. I'll shut up. That was a long preamble.
Okay, open that for discussion. Council.
I would agree with the idea that we should have a policy for text. I also believe that we should extend that to all communications, particularly written communications. Emails are an important open document, open records document, and emails are a critical means of communication. We should, in my opinion, it should be very open in terms of emails, so that an email that is sent shouldn't be blind copied to someone else where we don't know what's copied, what's not. That should be part of the policy, is that we prohibit blind copies. There should be no real reason why you would be blind copying somebody. It's an open communication. We should certainly be aware of who's being communicated to. So that's with respect to email. And then with respect to the charter, we have a charter that's very clear on how the interaction between elected officials and staff is supposed to take place, and that it should basically not be taking place other than a simple question of what time is the concert tonight, or something like that, there shouldn't be interaction between staff and elected officials. It should all go through the city manager. City manager can determine that it's appropriate that this person work on it and make that assignment. So that should also be part of this policy.
Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
You know, for me, this is all interesting discussion because it's relevant not only in the city frame of things, but also personally at my work. And so I've been listening to this. We just recently listened to the 5 Dysfunctions of the Team by Patrick Leonenzi, and he talks about, you know, the first thing they talk about is how important trust is. And so for me, a lot of what this goes down to, and I'm still a babe learning about organizational hierarchy. I'm sure that around this table here, you all are a lot further along than me. But for me, we're unique. City politics is unique in that instead of there being one person, a CEO, that can make an executive call, there's a board of 5 council members and a mayor. And so it's very unique because it can be like herding cats to get us all to come to consensus sometimes. But nevertheless, what our community needs from us is trust and accountability. And to me, one of the bases for that is respect of the hierarchy. So each person in the city, in the organization, has a responsibility of some type. And so when we get a little ways, I'm going to be dragging on longer than Andrew here, but when we get distracted from how that hierarchy works, the wheels come off. And that's just my opinion. You all can disagree with me, but I think really when you talk to the experts like Patrick Lannis and everything, when you start to get outside of that hierarchy and outside of who's responsible to who, the wheels start to come off. And so, you know, it's difficult moving from the private world to the political world where we have to work together as a group. But I think part of what's key to what Councilmember Hickson is saying is that organizations only work when we respect that hierarchy. And so, and that means respecting that so-and-so is accountable. They're accountable to the organization, they're accountable to the community for a certain job performance, and when we go around the hierarchy, then it all falls apart. So I don't know that this got distributed to everyone, but I think just because I was talking with Arlene about listening to this, she gave me this 5 dysfunctions of a team, and it's just a great reminder, and I'm learning a lot from it.
May I add something? It's so funny that Josh was listening to that podcast this morning at the same time, and I brought that in for him today.
So,
if you want, I'll send you a soft copy.
Okay.
Thank you. Capital remarks.
Okay. I actually think, you know, I'm a big proponent of following the hierarchy as well, right? Probably not as trained as my fellow council members, Dr. Beckles and Josh is getting his feet wet in it, but my different background of training is referring to a hierarchy and everyone in the organization understanding that hierarchy and understanding how important it is to follow, and everyone having the respect to follow that hierarchy across the board. And when we get outside of that, you're saying what I was going to say anyway, but the wheels do come off, right? And it leads to dysfunction, it leads to confusion, and it leads to expectations not being met across the board, where individuals get direction and they think, oh, I'm meeting the expectations, but they're not getting direction from the right person, so their expectations aren't being met, and it throws them for a loop in terms of what their responsibilities are. So I think it's critical that we have a hierarchy. I do think it's important to go back to communication is a big piece of that hierarchy. I am not the most perfect or articulate communicator or effective communicator, but I think it's important that we have good, clear communication. And part of good, clear communication is articulating the details of what you want and then letting the hierarchy take its place, right? It's like cranking the engine. you don't need to oil the engine every time. You're cranking the engine and allow this thing to do this and allow this thing to do that, and the pump's gonna put oil in the right spot. It's all gotta work, but if you're interjecting in between that, you can have issues with your engine. So more of a question outside of that, I would like our legal team to weigh in terms of how this reflects into our charter and confirm that this does reflect into our charter, and what we're saying, or our ideas of what this looks like as a policy, falls in line with what our charter says we should be doing, and doesn't outside the loop of that, because I think Councilmember Hickson has presented this falling within the guidelines of the charter, but I want to ensure that we've got that confirmation that our charter does state that we need to be following this, and you may not have an answer today, but by the time we need to vote on this, I'd like to make sure that we get an affirmative that this is within the charter bounds, and that we follow clearly the charter, and that the charter is really reinforcing what this resolution or ordinance is stating.
Just real quick, so you want us to review the charter for the purposes of confirming the hierarchy, or?
The hierarchy is clear, except I got it right here. I think what Matt may be getting to is that we want to ensure that we are bound by that hierarchy and how we operate within said hierarchy. I mean, the charter says, except for the purposes of inquiries, investigations, the mayor and council members should not give orders or directions to any employee who are subject to the direction and supervision of the city manager, either publicly, privately, directly, or indirectly. That doesn't include communication, I would assume. But having this type of, it's not vague, but having some sort of policy around just communication. I think we're talking about two different things here. The communication piece of it, and then how we operate inside of the bounds that we have drawn for ourselves through the charter, which I think are two pretty important discussions. I just think when it comes to how we communicate with staff and how what we look through our code of ethics, our code of ethics has some pretty unique stuff to say about how we communicate as individuals, how we communicate, and what our responsibility is. And the purpose of one of the three purposes of our code of ethics is to ensure that we are operating efficient. And having a communication policy with elected officials that allows Eric to have information through him out to us, I think does add some efficiencies. It also adds some inefficiencies, but I think the efficiencies outweigh it.
I understand what you want. And I think we're going to find that hierarchy would allow for the system that you have just described.
I think that's what Matt was
yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was. Yeah.
I think that it'll inform that as long as you stay away from the direct direction, as long as you stay away from get too close to an open meeting, which by definition it isn't, then I think you can create a policy that will allow that type of analysis, that type of flow of information.
Because all records are open records.
Open meetings, I'm sorry, if I said open meetings, then meetings.
Okay. Well, because all emails are open records and all texts are open records for conducting city business, is there any best practices built up around how we communicate via email?
Yeah, I would not. I could put that in my attorney-client privilege. I can tell you about that and how I impart my answer to it. Yes. Okay. But you have to use discretion when you know something is an open record, because it can get out very quickly.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilmember.
Councilmember Hickson, can I sort of use myself as an example? Occasionally, maybe once every couple of months, I'll raise something to Mary Beth's attention. But it can be perceived, like the other day my sister was in town and she noticed that the stone columns outside of Thrasher Park had sort of a brownish tinge to them. And I mean, I live here, so I just got used to it, I didn't notice it. So I took a picture of them, I texted to Mary Beth. Mary Beth says, what are you seeing? Because you just didn't notice. And I said, well, my sister noticed this brown tinge. I wasn't saying go power wash these or do something about it. I just was saying, I just noticed this. But it can be perceived by city staff.
Some people
that I
perceive
was-
that as indirect.
Right, right. So, some direction on what that, if I were to see something dangerous, let's say I saw a power line that was in jeopardy of hitting something, I would send a picture of that to Mary Beth, but that is different a little bit because that's a danger to the community. I'm just doing her a favor to help out the city.
Well, I
that they
think we
notice
could use
something.
best judgment. Also, sending a text to Mary Beth, one in a few months won't matter. We're very sad about that. But we have an emergency line on purpose for that. And a call is logged, and it allows us to know how efficient our staff is running by those calls being logged. Every time that one of us sends a text message to Mary Beth or to Tracy Rye or to Eric, it's not getting worked into the queue like it should be. So we don't know how many, I don't know how many requests you've given Mary Beth, and I can't do an ORR on how many requests you've given Mary Beth. So in this aspect, I do think there's some deficiencies through us following the normal procedures and saying, one, text it to Eric and instead of Mary Beth if we have to text stuff. But two, we have an emergency line, call it in if it needs to be done. Power washing a stone column outside of Thrasher Park is definitely not a safety issue, and it should, I mean, you should email that to Mary Beth instead of texting it to her.
Yeah. I think too, you're getting to a good point for this policy discussion, where it can be perceived, a council member's notification or FYI as a clear direction.
Right.
And I think it's incumbent on our city manager to ensure that his staff, and this is my opinion, that the staff understands that we're not to give that direction and that an FYI is an FYI. They need to make their professional judgment on whether or not a task needs to be completed, and they need to confer with their manager whether or not that task is a priority. And I think that's just my, you know what I mean?
I think that's a good point.
But the city manager's got to make sure his staff and his team is aware that when council sends something directly, that is only but an FYI. But I think we should endeavor to ensure that the city manager knows about it, so when that employee goes to their city manager, it's the inefficiencies of sending it to Eric, the efficiencies of Eric doesn't need to be retold what happened because he knows exactly what happened because he got it at the exact same time as the staff, right? So I think ensuring that our city managers knows, our city manager, he or her in the future or current, is aware of what's going on immediately is as important as letting Mary Beth know there's a power line hanging down, or there's mold on a playground equipment. So, but my expectation or hopes are, rather not expectations, my hopes are that employee will use their professional judgment in determining the priority of it and not the city council's direction. Right. So, but that has to be clear, and that has to be something that our staff up and down the board understands the clear chart, what the charter says, that none of us, the six of us, are directing you to do. We are FYI, and you have to make your own determination. We're just bringing it to light like you walk by it yourself, right? We're just an eyes and ears for you. But that's just.
So one of the phrases you use is best practices.
Right.
And I think I'm not formulating anything here, but I'm just talking about what I'm hearing. I think your best practices have to include the prohibition in the charter to give direction and preoccupy a staff member. And at the same time, I read from several sections that he's the CEO of the city. And so I think in all circumstances, you should try to go through him first. Because I think, and this is human resources, this is HR, you don't know what kind of pressure you're putting on that staff member by sending that. But that staff member knows the pressure if the city manager sends him a note to get the rust off the monument or the power line or whatever. So I think your best practices are a fail-safe would be to go through your manager.
It may not be the person that you as a council member or elected official identified as the person to get that FYI. It's better to go to Eric, who can then evaluate the staff's availability, who's the right person, the best qualified person to fix that problem, Whether or not we fix that problem, all of those decisions are really best done by the city
CEO.
manager and not, if an elected official reaches out to a staff person, the knee-jerk reaction from a staff person is to try to accommodate. But that might take him off of doing something that the city manager had decided was more important.
I think you should err by going to the city manager.
That's what I'm saying too.
And I think that this is a bit of a culture change for the city, because under Rudolph at times had expressed that he had while he respected the charter and he wanted to run things by the charter, that he had a bit of a open style management. And but that aside, new times come along, and certainly by running things by the book, I agree that they should be run this way.
So just a suggestion, because the city thrives on good customer service, so I certainly wouldn't discourage you if there's something that you're sending to me, and if you think Mary Beth is the person that knows about it, to copy her. Where I'd ask you to stop is, don't send me an email and say, please have Mary Beth do something.
Yeah, I probably should
That
start with
happens
that.
on days when she's on vacation, and I know she's on vacation, and if the person that really can handle it is John or Mike, then I'm gonna get that assignment to the person that's working that day, not the person that's trying to take the day off. So that's a distinction I would make, is I don't mind copying a senior staff member, and it should never be below the director level to me. But I think in the spirit of good customer service and being able to be responsive, then, I don't mind that you have someone else, but I would ask that you not tell me who should be responding to the item, because I think at that point that kind of stretches the intent of my serving as your CEO. The other thing I'd just say is that if there's a sense that someone is leaving me intentionally out of the loop, I've already communicated with Camille that we'll investigate if there's a situation where the direct order is intentionally given without my knowledge, because at that point I think it's clearly crossing the line in terms of that council non-interference with administration. And will it ever happen? Maybe not, but that would be my concern, is when direct order is given to someone. And the challenge with that is and I've talked to senior staff about that, it's very difficult for someone to understand whether they're being pressured to do something, because what the person says to them and what they hear may be two different things. And it gets back to good customer service. Well, I better do that.
Yeah. I'd like to interject two seconds here. I think that speaks directly to the point that Pat made in terms of pressure. We may confer on our staff without that, but also you said something that hits onto what Councilmember Bear says in terms of, it's 6 of us that make a decision. So if one of us is directing the decision to one employee, we're really out of whack in terms of a policy, especially if it's a policy-related decision. We should be conferring together in our policy sessions to make a determination on the best path forward for the city. Not any one of us individuals can make the path forward of the city. Whether or not you might be very, very comfortable with that, or it might be your expertise, or even you see, hey, this is a priority. You may not know that 5 of your other members may be like, yeah, I hear it as a priority. I don't think it's a priority. And we all say no. But the other 5 may say no, and I think it's important that we respect each other on mayor and council, that we're giving direction as a collective unit, right, and as a board. So it's a board direction versus an individual person's direction. So I think you hit to 2 different things that Councilor Rivera mentioned, as well as our legal counsel, Pat O'Brien, mentioned, in terms of pressure, as well as it's a lot less pressure when 6 of us have agreed on something. I think it's a safer zone than if it's one of us, because now you're doing something based on one person's opinion. So
it kind of goes back to pushing everything through the city manager, because he's the one person that can make that. Is this a policy thing that an individual is asking me to do? And he's got the judgment and the responsibility to say, yeah, let's put that on the next policy work session, because that's something that you all have to agree on. And it's clear in my mind that he needs to be at the top of that as the CEO, the person who is taking those sorts of directions and sorts of instructions, and then figuring out what to do with it.
Since we're talking about communication and through a policy, back in July, we emailed about personality testing and communications opportunity for us as a council. You responded that was budgeted. That was in July. Can you tell me where that is now? A personality screening for your top staff and for city council?
So staff have already taken the Emergenetics profile assessment and will be meeting next Friday with Carl Vincent's staff. I think it's important that we go through that process. I would say at that point it would be appropriate for the 7 of us. I don't think I have to pay a second time to take the same assessment, but for maybe the 6 of you then to do it. Because I think what's valuable there is senior staff are a team. They work together. They need to understand how they come at issues. I'm actually halfway through an email to you to talk about that, but to understand how they each may approach the same issue from a different perspective. But I think it's important then for this team, and perhaps we'll add into it as well, to go through that as our team, because it's really 2 different teams. And I don't know that releasing the information on every department director to your level is necessarily the best.
Yeah, and there was a reason I asked about this, because we're talking about communication and email via text. My idea is this policy would be, from our viewpoint, it would not be that how your staff communicates is solely up to you. So if Mary Beth needs to text Tracy, staff, that is a staff to staff, and my objective in this policy would not be to hinder that at all.
Yeah, this is elected officials to staff,
Yeah.
just that far.
Well, and to the item that you just left, 3.5, develop and implement a plan to address legacy staff for and director level relationship issues. So that Emergenetics is the first step. It's for us to better understand how we can better work with each other. But as I said, I think that if the 12 of us that are going through that next week say that was a poor investment, then I would suggest that the 7 of us go through that as a team.
Okay.
It's very similar to Myers-Briggs. It's supposedly been statistically validated, which apparently no one ever bothered to do with Myers-Briggs. They just got everybody to take it, and at some point it was such a common approach that no one questioned the validity of that process. But as I said, next Friday is when Carl Vincent's staff is spending a day with senior management to go through those results.
Well, it's good to hear. It's been bubbling out there for a while, so I'm glad to hear that that's moving forward.
Okay. Well, relative to policy, there's a couple of things. I think it's important that any policy we create is enforceable, and it has to be, of course, centered around our charter, but there are legal points to consider. Andrew mentioned email. Council in total may not understand that we can't, while this meeting is going on, we can't email each other. It violates the Open Meetings Act. You may or may not know that. We can't text each other during this meeting. That violates it. It's a violation of our open meeting. So I'm just saying, I know that we want to create a policy. It's important that we do create a policy. I'm all for that. But communication has to be 2 ways. It can't just be, okay, we're going to communicate this way to the city manager staff. How does staff communicate and city manager communicate with council? We all have things that we feel we need to get done in somewhat on a timely manner. And I don't know how we as council are. We think what we want is what's most important. But that may not be the first priority, that's whatever's best for the city. But you gotta talk about communication both ways, not just top down. It should be top down, inside out, so we have to figure that out too. Efficiencies are very important. There's a lot of things that we're working on. Right now I'm working on the state of the city, so communications and getting that information back in a timely manner is very important. And I know that other things are going on too, but yeah, in my opinion, that's one of those singular important PR events of an entire city, because it's focused on the great things that the city is doing, and we're promoting the city. So for me, that has a high priority. It may not be a high priority to the city manager or to staff, but to me, that's a high priority. So the other part of this is how we communicate in the other direction. That's very important too.
I think that's fair. One of the unique things is if the city manager is not performing as we so expect, there is a review policy. We're about to talk about it. If he is in any way hindering what we feel the state of the city, then that's a performance issue. That's not a communication issue. And if he is not performing up to what we feel is our expectations for him, those need to be clearly defined and spelled out in his review process. And in doing such, if one of the things that we don't feel he's doing well is allowing his employees to communicate with us through whatever means, that's a performance issue. And how his employees communicate to us is solely up to him. So we need to.
But how do we get the information that we? What's the answer?
We get it from Eric, and if he's not giving it to us, then that's a performance issue.
Or Eric's assigning. Eric can assign someone to.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point, but it's all under Eric's authority.
But I'm saying there has to be an accountability in getting information back to us too. I'm not hearing.
Well, the accountability is in the next, our next agenda item.
So you're going to wait for a review before you discuss?
No, according to Pat, he is subject to a review at any meeting. Isn't that right, Pat?
I believe so.
His reviews are constantly.
Okay.
That's my understanding, Eric.
Standard reviews.
That's actually my understanding too.
Okay.
I'm just saying, okay, I agree.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's
I think that becomes a performance issue. If there is a need for information that can't be gotten for some reason.
And we feel he's stonewalling us.
And you feel that it's being stonewalled. That's a clear performance issue, and would need to be dealt with as you would any employee that had a specific lack of performance in a timely manner. So I'm not sure that that's a communication per se. That's job description. Well, that's a one-on-one.
Right, I'm just saying, we all have tasks as council members. The citizens have charged us with oversight of the city. There's things that we want to get done.
Right.
Those priorities should be in line with our comp plan, of course. And we should, the council should all be
on board with what those requests are. Yeah, I mean, if it isn't up to any one of us to assign a pet project that I particularly want to get done without concurrence from this body. This body is not the body that decides that. To your point, the state of the city is a council-sanctioned event that council has more than once said that's an important thing that must happen. So there's it's not you that's assigning the activity, it's us that's assigning the activity. If there were an activity that only one person on this body decided was that person's priority, and the rest of the body didn't concur, I think there's a legitimate pushback there. Go back and make sure your colleagues agree. I don't think that's true for the state of the city, but there are, occasionally there are some things that are like that.
So I don't think we would vote on this next meeting.
No, I don't think we'll have anything ready by then.
I think that having Eric and Pat craft some sort of policy, looking at other municipalities, looking at best practices, feedback from us, would get us to a point where we have a policy. But I thought it was important that we start with, one, that we give direction to staff to work on this, and also put some boundaries about at least what we're kind of looking like. A good example is, I would love for you to do this, Eric, but I also want you to go put the basketball rims back up. And I don't think there's, I think the mayor agrees with me, but I don't think we haven't given you direction collectively. So that's why I brought it up. I wanted us to give you direction collectively, at least in my opinion, that we should move forward with this.
What time frame? Do you want this in March? Do you want it in April?
What do you think?
Sense of urgency?
Just have done in 2 weeks.
Oh, definitely not our next meeting, no.
But as you're saying, March policy or April
I'm
policy?
asking, when would you like us to bring this back?
Well, I thought you meant when we were gonna put the basketball.
Well, I would just say, if,
Right.
on that issue, if you would like to give me that direction, and the nice lady at the back of the room, you know, those came down based on a conversation the chief and I had, related to more than just shots fired.
Yeah, okay.
But I take direction, you know. Now, we need to put a fence at the end of the court, because that fence is long gone.
All right, well, we'll deal with that.
So that's a good example of, if there's a sense of urgency
That is a
on
good
this
example.
council, be glad to take that issue up.
So with respect to this issue,
March
getting back to
policy?
what would be a reasonable time frame for you to develop a draft that we could review?
March policy is good with me.
Yeah.
March policy? Okay.
Would you like us to send it around to get you to individually kind of comment back to us, so that?
I think that would be good.
Yeah, I
Just
think-
surprise everybody.
No.
No, I'd rather not be surprised.
Well, that's the reason it's on here. I did not want to surprise everybody.
But that's why I'm asking March, because I think it's important that we come up with something and we give you the opportunity to poke and prod and tell us if there's something
So
that's just.
you mentioned email and texting, I guess that's part of
The texting's the hard part, and I will leave it up to Pat and Eric to figure out a little bit about that and how we view that as policymakers about what we want this policy to encompass. Ultimately, it's all about communication with staff from elected officials.
Yeah.
One thing I'll say, when you text, that is very difficult to capture for an ORR. Now, we can go buy the software to do that, which I don't believe we have. But when I left my last job, I took a photo of every text on my phone and emailed it so that they would have a public record, because I figured someone was gonna take my phone and wipe it, and then 3 months later ask me about some text. So the challenge with text, it's great for a picture, if there's a picture of something that needs to be repaired, because nothing is better than a picture. But what I've tried to use is, don't put something in the text that you wouldn't say to someone as you're crossing paths in the hallway.
Eric, we got smartphones. It's just as easy to open up we all have our city email.
An email just recorded.
Yeah,
the
that's
text.
so much easier for
Yeah.
Dr. Trent to pull up.
So
Go
just
ahead, sorry.
as a point of technology, I would probably investigate that all your directors, including yourself, have we make available text message via email. So you actually can text an email to a phone number. So like it used to be the thing when we used to have all T9, that was all emails. They weren't text messages, right? You'd send it to my phone number at vtext.com. It's essentially a text message.
Look at that.
But that makes it a public record, and it will then also copy to your email. Just as maybe you don't need that software if you just set everybody up. That's on the staff. I mean, I wouldn't need that because that's text. You don't pay for my phone, but for all the phones that are paid for, which are staff, you can easily set that up, and then automatically those become public records, and then it's a text message, and we don't have to worry about this conversation.
The challenge is if Kathleen decides to text me after my most recent comment, if she doesn't have it, am I capturing that one?
No. It's only to the person that it's going to. So as long as it's going to any one of the staff, if it goes to anybody who has a city-owned city-owned text message, phone number, there's an
It'll
email
capture.
associated to
Okay.
it. So if we text each other, that would not be captured. But anybody adding Eric or adding anybody from the city would automatically be captured as a record.
Okay. We'll look at that.
Sounds like a good approach. There's a lot in the news about, in Washington, keeping the records of government. We're the government. So, learning some lessons from that is not a bad thing.
And there are record retention laws too.
There are, yeah. Exactly.
Okay, I think we're clear on this topic.
This comes up in litigation all the time, most especially.
We don't want
divorce litigation. But their texts, like going back 3 years or so, there's a bracket, are more easily recoverable than you think.
I was looking at the chief over here. I'm sure when they say people are texting and driving, they have a good way to tell it.
We're happy with people just to keep texting, because like whenever they post, they do something on social media and then we go arrest them.
It's easy to catch
Don't
them.
let what we're saying here get out to the public. I'm kidding.
Sorry.
We want them to continue to text.
I did it.
I think part of the policy, just one last item on this policy. We need to make sure that the tone of communication is respectful and not respectful is the best way to put it. We need to make sure that that's a clear part of the policy. That the tone needs to be professional and respectful.
Yeah, I think that, and I think to piggyback on that, I think it's in our code of ethics, so
It's in our code of ethics, and we also have which may be related to anti-gossiping policy,
Yes, you
which
do.
all city employees have signed.
Those sorts of things need to be, if we're gonna put something together that's all encompassing, let's make sure that those sorts of things are incorporated in this so that we're clear as to what we expect of each other.
Absolutely.
good point.
Okay, let's move to 13, city manager evaluation draft. Eric, how's that Camille?
This is Camille.
I can't be.
Mr. Mayor and Council.
Evening.
Here to approve the evaluation package and adopt the new performance evaluation process for the city manager. With background, as the mayor and city council has recognized the need to strengthen the evaluation process going forward. Previously, the role of human resources was not clearly defined in this process, so establishing this new evaluation practice will enhance the cohesiveness between HR, city manager, and mayor and council. Not sure if you had a chance to review the.
Let me ask that question. Council, have you had a chance to take a look at it? We don't need to go line by line.
No, we've already done that, right? Any questions?
So, yeah, I think we're good, Camille.
Okay, I just have one question, if I may now.
Yes.
On that first page, I thought we said we were gonna get rid of the evaluation instructions and checklist, or does it correspond to the Likert scale? The opening paragraph, who's right there? The top. No, go up. Go up. I have an evaluation instruction and checklist.
This page. Page 13A.
That, I thought we said we were going to remove that, or it was edited to match the Likert scale. Because I recall the scale was 1 to 5, and now I'm seeing 1 to 4.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, okay, good.
Any other questions?
Yes, you brought up the role of HR with respect to the process. So, there was a lot of discussion about that a few months ago, is what exactly is the role of HR with respect to the city manager, because it's obviously a little awkward. But, are we defining that in this? I mean, is there a place where we've defined it?
It is, it's sort of,
It's on the
when they
process.
are-
I see that.
It's on the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
All right,
There's
now I
some
see it,
hiccup in that.
now I see it. I was looking for it in a different place. Got it.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
Councilmember Beer?
Just to sort of why is it that the letters are cut off on the right-hand side?
It's
Okay,
Granicus.
so I must apologize for that because the original document is the PDF, so we were desperately trying to export it into Word, so, but I promise you it'll be a better.
It's the Granicus software. It strips in on the right information on every document, the whole packet. So if we have,
So we'll get it.
your part is right.
Get that one.
It's the block that's on the right-hand side that overlays on every single document. So if we have any document that is too wide in terms of the print area, when Granicus assembles, this is a Granicus expert here, but when Granicus assembles your agenda, it's stripping in, and you'll see that on other pages in the document, but the original document doesn't have that.
We'll clear that.
And this came from another jurisdiction, so they created the
Any other questions, Cal?
origins.
Thank you, Camille, we appreciate that.
Thanks
Let's
for
move
hanging
to-
in.
All right.
Let's move to 14, suspension, there we go, of city contribution of post retiree health care for new hires, as discussed in February, council retreat.
So there's no backup to this, but Thursday you indicated that you wanted to kind of fast track this. So I think the key that's missing, that you would need to decide if this comes forward in 2 weeks at your council meeting, is an effective date or a way for us to implement. So for example, you could say that any new offer to a new hire would not include this. And the reason I give that example is my one data point last week was an officer that we'd already offered a job to who won't start until, I think, April 1st or the end of March, because he has to complete what he's doing with the police athletic league down in Atlanta. So just think about how quickly you want to do this, but I would just suggest you don't want to capture anyone that's already been offered a job, but you want to capture anyone that has not yet been offered a job.
Yes.
Could you put together some wording?
Yes.
And then I would just say that it would be effective the date of our meeting. But then you put together some wording based on the cases that you know that are outstanding, and then if we need to change it at the table, but I
If
think
that's what you're looking for, then yes.
Yep.
And in the meantime, we'll stop talking about that to potential hires, so that we're not telling them about something and then saying, well, you took too long to make up your mind, it's gone.
We've had a lot of discussion on this issue. I know that staff kind of hears what we're talking about, not only here, but via the internet. How's that being perceived? Eric?
Well, I think.
I mean, I don't want to perceive that we're stripping benefits from our employees, because that negatively impacts morale.
So I think it's important that it's clear that you're not taking anything from existing employees. You've got some senior employees that aren't the new person that's coming in the door that we've been talking about may stay 2 or 3 years and move on and move throughout their careers. So the key is to balance that. You have a lot of experienced employees. There's some in the room today that get a little alarmed when there's a suggestion that an existing benefit might be withdrawn.
So it's
That was not what we were talking about on Thursday, but there's concern, and I've heard feedback, and Mary Beth is, you can say anything now,
Hey, she turned her papers in?
She's in that period where she's a great asset to us and not much to fear, but.
Since you opened that door, I'd like to hear.
Mary Beth, what up?
What would you like to hear?
How are our employees perceiving these conversations about retirement? Is it fear, is it trepidation, is it concern?
They're unsettled because to them it's unknown what's getting ready to happen. So the ones that have reached out to me, there's a little bit of fear and there's a little bit unsettled by it.
Mayor?
Well, that sounds like a communication issue.
I'm hitting directly there. I mean, there ought to be a memo out from our city manager maybe via HR to dispel any false myths, because we're obviously not doing that. So I think it's important.
Second ask.
Yeah.
We have requested that before.
Right, but we haven't made a policy decision yet. So.
I think the key, maybe to follow up on Mary Beth, is this may not do it, but if the sense is there's a next step and there's a next step and there's a next step, that what is not on the table today might be on the table in the future. And that's a tougher one to dispel, but that's, and I've got another person on this line. I've got an experienced chief here who's got some very long-term senior staff, and I'm sure Bill, you've heard the same thing.
Yes. I think that to your point, Councilmember Myers, is that when we know something, right, we know the healthcare being an example, but we know what it is specifically referencing, we have communicated that. And to a point where my folks, they get it. They understand that it's outrageously expensive for healthcare. They understand that. But just being blunt, it's similar to what Mary Beth was saying. That is that the fear is I'll just say the words that have been said to me, and that's chipping away.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to communicate that, because I think that you're basically referencing we don't know what the future holds. I mean, that's where my own personal budget, right?
Yeah.
I just feel like that's probably most of the consternation is through that. And we've done the best that we can, and I really like the word communication. I use that often. So I would just ask, if I could, I'd ask, but just as much, heads up or communication on this. Really, what is the specific topic that's being addressed, so that we can dispel all the other stuff.
I think Councilmember Beard.
Yeah, okay.
To me, it sounds like a joint statement from mayor and council could be beneficial here, where mayor and council say, in as much as we're able to, based on that we have a term that we expires and we're not going to be part of the body anymore potentially, but in as much as we can, this mayor and council is committed to standing behind the benefits that they offered upon employment, and stands behind that we intensely value our staff and the folks that have been loyal for so long to the city, and if you were to listen to every single word that we've said throughout this whole conversation, again and again, people have said, no, we are not going to go back on something that we offered to an employee. So I don't know if we could put together some kind of a resolution, or a statement or something that an internal PR statement from mayor and council that just affirms our commitment to that.
I would just add one thing, and it's not argumentative to what you're saying. In fact, saying is one thing. It's here, right? And we have to listen to it, at some point to hear that. But there have been some things in text and writing that are confusing and a little maybe possibly misleading. That's not directed toward anyone in particular. It's really just a point that what you're saying is, as far as communication goes. Clear communication on something that's as delicate, I would say, or important, right, impactful, but long-term impact for an employee would be, from where I sit, 60 employees is greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
Councilman.
So I think there's like three things I hear here, right? One is easily the communication piece, and I think Councilman Bear made a good point that, you know, this particular body and this particular body, which is for the next year, for sure, God willing, that it has made a point, and I haven't heard anything different, that we could probably have a joint statement out with our city manager to the employees to talk about what our plan is. But I think Councilman Bear also made a great point. If you're to listen to everything we're saying, it should be clear that we're not only concerned with our current employees and future employees, we're concerned with putting our dollars and our decision points where they are. I mean, we've talked about funding accounts that haven't been funded before, right? So there should be as equal spin on, we've done something that other councils have not done for whatever reasons, to ensure that what those employees are promised will be there. And so I think it's important that that if you're hearing this and you're coming up with something, you can come up with whatever you want to come up with. You can make up whatever you want to make up. But if factually speaking, I think we've done quite the opposite of what you guys are talking about, right?
I mean, that's such a good point, man.
Yeah. So I think we need to communicate it, but if those employees are listening to what we're saying today, or listening tomorrow, or whenever they have a chance to listen to it, I want them to understand, at least from this particular body, and I'm speaking for the 6 of us because I've heard all 6 of us talk about this. We are very, very, very committed to our current employees, and not only that, but committed to ensuring that what we promised them is protected, and that the longevity of what they have in their career path here, there is no out. So it's actually not chipping away. It's actually adding stacks of chips to the table and saying, we're putting our dollars and we're putting our investment into you. So I would be changing that message to that. I'm willing to help as a council to do that, but that's what we've done. So it's pretty easy for us to articulate it, because we've only had our actions to do just that. But I understand, I'm an employee too at my other job. You hear something on an all-call and you go, oh my God, what does that mean to me? And then the rumor mill starts. Yeah. So it happens. That's why over-communication is imperative. And maybe we need to have an executive summary after some of these conversations that have employee issues involved in them to have it, but we need to do it as a collective body. I don't want that to be, I'd prefer it not to be the city manager, because he's not making those decisions, we are as a council.
Yeah, this is a lot different than a company that
Yes.
we've had experience with, because all those decisions by the board of directors are made not in the light of, hey, you know, everybody staring at you, but they're made in private, and then there's an announcement. And so the deliberation that happened over 6 months at the board of directors meetings, you don't ever know about that, but they do know about it when it's us. So at the end of all of that, I think we probably do owe the employees some sort of a overall statement that doesn't overcommit, but at least restates our commitment to our employees, our existing employees. And at the same time, it is now that we've got a resolution or a policy that we are about to enact in 2 weeks, now is the time to explain what that policy means from the city manager, HR director, to the staff.
Well, that's okay, then maybe it's what you do in 2 weeks, which has no impact on any existing employee.
That's right.
And if you're comfortable, I send that out, but when you adopt the funding of that trust fund,
yes,
that's your commitment, that's your putting dollars into a commitment that has been made in the past without a funding solution. So that might be one where you either as a council do a proclamation, or you authorize the mayor to issue, and then that comes from this body, because that's your action of making that financial commitment. I can explain what we're doing, doesn't affect current employees now, but I think that
it should be solidified by a vote by this council.
Exactly, so we have to wait till 2 weeks from now to do that.
Well, that one's coming back later, because that's when we bring back the resolution to actually fund. That's on your March policy,
Oh, yeah.
your April council meeting. But at that point, I think that would be appropriate.
So what we do in 2 weeks is only a first step.
I would share the relevance of that,
Communicate
is it does not impact
What we
any
do in,
existing plan.
whatever it is, 4 weeks or 8 weeks, that's when we have a resolution. I'm wondering, would a press release be even more effective?
Well, Councilmember Hickson.
It was like for 5 minutes ago. Can I still talk about it?
Yes.
Okay. I was confused. This council has time and time again, Eric, when you first came on board, you immediately gave a 3 or 4% pay raise across the board?
Last February.
Okay. And then this council recommitted through our pay study drastic pay increases for some employees. So I'm a little confused about how we could have some employees who feel that we're chipping away at healthcare. Given the discussion we had here, the data shows that we're doing the exact opposite. We're investing more and more in our employees. So I'm wondering through this letter, do we reconfirm the things that I just said? Hey, in order to solidify some of this, like the mayor said, we're going to put this trust fund aside. That's got to help with morale that, oh, by the way, your paychecks are bigger, we're trying to help out, and we're committed to making sure that the long-term viability, I think Josh mentioned this, the long-term viability of us being able to pay you is for us to be able to put aside enough money through the healthcare savings.
If I could be so forward as to offer a suggestion, perception is sometimes better than reality, and being that we have a number of employees who gratefully call Norcross home or have lots of connections to Norcross, I personally would love to have Pam from Accent Creative craft some kind of a statement from mayor and council after listening to this portion of our meeting that was a part of what we voted on at our next meeting. It was a part of this suspension of further health, and it just says the mayor and council of the city of Norcross, Georgia are committed to being fair and equitable to our staff, and that we're committed to the future viability of benefits, and this action that mayor and council is taking this day does not affect in any shape or fashion anybody who is currently employed at the city of Norcross.
It does. It affects them in the positive.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
The way that this affects them is that it affects them in the positive to ensure that the commitments that the city of Norcross has made for their employment here, we're able to honor those commitments. And so it could just be a statement that is repeated a couple times when we make these changes, because
I think you do.
This little soundbite could be taken by the community as oh, the city of Norcross has fallen apart financially, and now they're having to suspend health care benefits and blah blah blah. And that's just a suggestion.
I'd support public or internal or both. So that's my. I don't think you can over communicate that. So those who live in the community and those who work in the community should both be getting the same message and hear it.
I think public and internal, because public also goes to, hey, the city council, it's a good place to work, because city council supports their employees. So I think we do both.
Well, that is the message that you want to communicate. Okay, anything else on this? The staff is clear on direction. Very good. Okay, that was our last agenda item, number 14. So we'll entertain a motion to go into exec for real estate, personnel.
Let's do all three. We got any legal stuff?
Legal.
I'd like to make a motion.
Legal make.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn to executive for personnel, real estate, and legal.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and seconded. Any objections or move to question? Thank you, staff, for staying here with us until 9 o'clock. I know you got
Thank
here.
you so much.
I was here at
10 items next time.
All in favor, leave it on. Raise your right hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposing, saying ayes.
Good night.
That was so awesome.
good diet plan. I have a smoothie, 2 Kit Kats, and a Snickers coming.
That's a hell of a diet. Yeah.
So, we were so busy today. When I called you, I think I called you back, like, I didn't eat lunch too, so I wasn't like starving. So I was like, no, wait, you can have food. Like, she was gonna order food. She was like, oh, we can have the food come at like 5:30, and I can eat, so I can be ready for this, right? The DoorDash or whatever person never came. And then she was calling like, where are you at? Person was 4 minutes, then 8 minutes, 4 minutes, then 8 minutes for 30 minutes. So I was like, let's make me a smoothie.
Your eyes are good.
Don't worry about it. Just firm remain. Then I'll affirm the bill.